Chapter 3756. The middle-aged man from the auction house smiled and looked past Lung Hua. His gaze paused on the lady in red for a moment before he looked away and said to Lung Hua, "Young Master Lung, we've already brought your carriage and the lady to the back door. You can leave through the back door. There are already many people watching the front door." Although the people in the auction house were curious about their identities, they knew that they couldn't afford to offend these people, especially after seeing the lady in black's shocking battle prowess. They knew that these people weren't ordinary people. Now that there were many people watching them, wanting to know their origins, the auction house was letting them leave through the back door to make things easier for them and avoid those people. Feng Jiu, wearing a veil, slowly walked out and said with a smile, "Since that's the case, many thanks." Seeing this, Lung Hua nodded and said to Feng Jiu, "Master, be careful of the doorway." Then he walked out with her. "I'll lead the way for you too," the middle-aged man said as he strode forward and led them to the back door. When they reached the first floor and were about to walk to the back door, a voice sounded. "The two of you, please wait." The middle-aged man leading the way was slightly surprised. He stopped and turned around to take a look. He saw a middle-aged man and three young men standing not far away. He said to Lung Hui and Feng Jiu, "You two, follow this straight and you'll reach it." As he spoke, he walked towards them and asked, "Is there anything I can help you with?" Seeing that the lady in red and the man didn't even look back, the middle-aged man quickly stepped forward and shouted, "I want to exchange medicinal ingredients with you too. Are you interested?" Feng Jiu didn't look back and continued walking at a leisurely pace. Lung Hua looked back and smiled, not interested. Then he followed Feng Jiu to the back. Then, the middle-aged man still wanted to go forward, but he was blocked by the people from the auction house. "If you want to leave, please go through the front door," the middle-aged man from the auction house said as he gestured for him to leave. The three young men standing behind him looked at each other. One of them wanted to step forward, but when he saw the middle-aged man's sullen face, he couldn't help but withdraw his foot. The middle-aged man's eyes flashed when he saw the two of them leave. He looked at the auctioneer and asked, "May I know which mansion those two are from?" No comment. The auctioneer said, still making an inviting gesture. When he saw this, the middle-aged man cupped his hands and left with the three people behind him. Several thousand-year-old elixirs had been bought by the same person. It could be said that many people had their eyes on the guest in the private room. Therefore, when they saw the auction house staff sending them out through the back door, some people also got up and left. At the back door of the auction house, Lung Shuang was waiting in a carriage. When he saw them, he went to help Feng Jiu into the carriage. She also got in the carriage to accompany him. Lung Hua was in charge of driving the carriage. The carriage slowly moved down a small path and left. After watching them leave, the two people from the auction house looked at each other and walked in. However, just as they entered, a few groups of people secretly followed behind them and headed towards the small path. Chapter 3757. Do I look like someone who's afraid of trouble? Feng Jiu smiled and leaned against the carriage lazily. He covered his stomach with one hand and said, "Others are courting death. You're just sending them on their way. As the saying goes, if others don't offend me, I won't offend them. If others offend me, why should I endure? Besides, it's not like I can't beat them." Hearing her casual words, Lung Shuang's face softened. She was not a good talker, so seeing that her master didn't blame her, she was relieved. "Lung Shuang, you two have been with me for so many years, and I have many outstanding men and women around me. Don't tell me you two don't like any of them?" Feng Jiu looked at Lung Shuang with a smile, his face full of expectation. Lung Shuang was taken aback by the sudden change in topic. Her expression froze for a moment before she shook her head. No, she had never thought of this question. Moreover, just like what her master had said, there were too many outstanding men and women around her master. She had always been by the side watching and interacting with them, so she really did not have any feelings towards any outstanding men. After all, she had seen even more outstanding men. Feng Jiu took out two spiritual fruits from his space and threw one to her. He took a bite and said with a smile, "You should also take care of your marriage. If it wasn't for the fact that you and Du Fan are too familiar with each other, they would be a good choice. After all, they were all taught by me. Even the young masters of aristocratic families can't compare to them. Hearing this, a smile appeared on Lang Shuang's face. However, the smile disappeared as soon as it appeared. She frowned slightly and said, "Mistress, someone is following us." "Yes, they're following us from the auction house. They're probably after the things we bought," Feng Jiu said casually as he ate the spiritual fruit. "I'll go out and stop them," Lang Shuang said and put the spiritual fruit on the table. She opened the curtain and went outside. She said to Lang Hua, "Take Master back first. I'll stop them and then go back." If they followed them back to the small house in the middle of the lake, the following days would not be peaceful. She had to stop them so that they wouldn't disturb her master. "Big sister, be careful," Lang Hua said as he watched her jump off the carriage and continue to drive the carriage forward. The several groups of people following in the dark were surprised to see a black-robed woman jump down from the carriage. Just as they were about to chase after her, they saw a flash of light in the woman's hand, and several sharp sword chi instantly attacked them. "Xiao! Xiao!" Several streams of sword chi flew out, forcing out the few groups of people hiding in the dark. The people who had jumped out from the shadows to avoid the attack appeared in a sorry state. Some of them were not fast enough, and their robes were cut by the chi blade. Some of them were shocked by the sword chi. For a moment, all of them stared angrily at Lang Shuang. "What are you doing? You're courting death." Because these people were originally in the auction house, they didn't know that the person who killed the Chun family head outside was the black-clothed woman in front of them. Now that their path was blocked and they were almost injured by her sword chi, their anger immediately surged. Lang Shuang pointed her sword to the ground. Her cold eyes swept across their faces and she said, "If you don't want to die, you'd better leave now." Chapter 37:58. Lang Shuang didn't say anything. Instead, he twirled the sharp sword in his hand, and a cold light shot out. His murderous aura spread out like ripples in the water, startling the crowd and causing them to quickly retreat. "Don't ask about things you shouldn't know. You don't have the right to ask." Lang Shuang coldly swept his gaze over them and released a powerful aura. In the next moment, he swung his sword in front of him. Sword chi and dust flew into the air and spread out in all directions. When the dust and sword chi settled down, the crowd looked again, but the black-robed woman was nowhere to be seen. No one said anything. They only pursed their lips and looked at the sword mark on the ground. There was a lingering fear in their hearts. Outside the auction house, I heard that the person who killed the family head was a black-robed woman. Someone suddenly asked, as if thinking of something. Hearing this, the others looked at each other in dismay. It seems so, but we were all inside and didn't see what the black-robed woman looked like. We only know that she chopped off a man's hand in the auction house before being asked to leave. The crowd fell silent. They seemed to have guessed something. They looked at each other and didn't say anything else as they left one after another. On the other side of the street, Lang Hua stopped at the side of the street. He bought some things from a shop on the street and put them into the carriage. "Master, these pastries are freshly made and are still warm." Feng Jiu took them from the carriage and said, "Let's go. Let's go back to the residence." "Yes," Lang Hua replied and continued to drive the carriage away. When they reached the entrance of the residence, Lang Shuang followed them. "Master." She stepped forward to help Feng Jiu get off the carriage and said, "I've stopped all the people on the road, but I guess there will be a lot of people asking about Master. I think it won't be long before the news that Master lives here will be known by outsiders." After all, they were in Spirit Immortal City and didn't hide their movements. As long as they used their power to ask around, they would be able to find out about them. "It's all right," Feng Jiu said as he strode inside. He said indifferently, "Even if they know that we live here, they won't know who we are. This place is so closed off from the other continents. It's very difficult to find out about our origins." "Master, you're back." Du Fan, who was inside, saw Feng Jiu and the others come in and came forward with a smile. "Why are you back? Did you go to Qi Kang to help?" Feng Jiu asked as he walked inside. Qi Kang's side is almost done. Moreover, with the help of the immortal sex people, the handover will be easier. I saw that there was nothing else, so I came back to take a look. He fanned a fan in his hand and asked with a smile, "It's rare for Master to go out." I heard from the people in the manor that Master went to the auction house. Did you buy anything that you like? Yes, I did bid for a lot of good stuff. Fengjiu smiled. After sitting down in the pavilion, she flipped her hand and took out the egg-sized Millennium Warm Jade. Du Fan, take this Millennium Warm Jade and find an engraver to help me make a pair of jade pendants. I'm planning to let my children wear them in front of their chests. As for the design, I'll draw it for you later. Chapter 37:59. He handed the piece of jade to Fengjiu and said with a smile, "Master, you should keep this piece of jade by your side for now. Once I've found an engraver and you've finished drawing the blueprint, I'll come and get it." Now that his master was pregnant, it would be good for her body to keep this piece of 1,000-year-old jade by her side. Moreover, he wouldn't be able to engrave it in a short period of time. Hearing his words, Fengjiu was startled for a moment before she smiled. "That's fine too." She took the jade back and played with it in her hands, saying, "For the next few days, I'll probably stay in the alchemy department to refine pills. If you have any matters to attend to, you can deal with them yourselves. Also, you have to hurry up with the things I gave you." "Master, don't worry. The people below have been investigating, and we've also received news that the Devil Lord hasn't appeared during this period of time. The mainland over there is now a large piece of land, and nothing major has happened." Fengjiu nodded and waved her hand, indicating for them to leave. She sat down in the pavilion to rest for a while. At this time, Lung Shuang came in with tea. After placing it on the table, he asked, "Master, do you want to go back and rest?" "No need. My body isn't that weak." Fengjiu smiled. After taking a sip of tea, she stood up and walked towards the alchemy department. Seeing this, Lung Shuang hurriedly followed. In the alchemy department, Fengjiu wasn't refining pills. Instead, she was concocting medicinal liquids. She was preparing to concoct medicinal liquids from the medicine she bought today with some of the herbs in her space. She was going to use it to protect Moses' heart and replenish his nutrients. Thus, as soon as she obtained the elixir, she threw herself into the quiet alchemy department to concoct medicinal liquids. Because there was no one to help her, she saw Lung Shuang standing guard outside the courtyard and called out, "Lung Shuang, come and help me." Now that she was pregnant with twins, it was inconvenient for her to move around. She was busy bending down to pick up things and so on. Soon, she was so tired that sweat seeped out of her forehead. Fengjiu and Lung Shuang were busy and stayed in the alchemy courtyard for 2 days and 1 night. During these 2 days and 1 night, Fengjiu did not rest at all. Seeing this, everyone in the residence was extremely anxious, but they did not dare to disturb her. After all, during the refining process, what Master disliked the most was to be interrupted. It was very likely that the refining of the medicinal liquid would be interrupted and fail. When Hui Lang returned to the residence and found out that Fengjiu and Lung Shuang had stayed in the alchemy department for so long, he couldn't help but reveal a worried expression. "Madam is still pregnant with little Master. Can her body take it if she doesn't rest?" He paced back and forth outside the courtyard, looking in anxiously. However, there was no one in the alchemy courtyard. At this moment, the two of them were in the refining room, and no one outside could see them at all. "This won't do. I have to find Fan Lin and ask if Madam's body can take this situation," Hui Lang said to Du Fan and Lung Hua. Just as he was about to leave, he heard Lung Hua's surprised voice. "Master is out." When Hui Lang heard this, he hurriedly turned around and saw a door in the courtyard open. Fengjiu, who looked slightly tired, was supported out by Lung Shuang. Seeing her, Hui Lang hurriedly went forward. "Madam, how are you? Is your body all right? Quick, quick, sit down and rest first." He hurriedly helped Fengjiu to a chair at the side and sat down. Chapter 37:60. "Madam, do you want to eat something first? Or do you want to go back and sleep first?" Hui Lang asked, worried that her body couldn't take it. Fengjiu took a sip of the water handed by Long Wan, moistened her throat, and said, "Let people prepare some food. I'll go back and take a bath before eating." Saying this, she stood up and said to Du Fan and the others, "You don't have to stay here. Go do what you need to do." "Yes." Du Fan and the others responded, looked at each other, and then left first. Feng Jiu returned to the courtyard and took a bath. She lay down and rested for a while, only to feel that her body was lying on the soft bed, and her whole body relaxed. She softly exhaled, and one hand instinctively stroked her bulging belly, and the corner of her mouth slightly revealed a smile. After resting for about the time it takes to burn a stick of incense, the Lung Shuang outside came in with something. "Master, eat a bowl of porridge first. Put on the table," Feng Jiu said, without opening her eyes. Just let her put it down, and then motioned for her to leave. Lung Shuang put down the porridge, looked at her, and then retreated and closed the door. After a while, Feng Jiu got up and ate the porridge on the table, and then flashed into the space. She came to the ice bed, looked at the sleeping Xinyuan Mose, and couldn't help but reach out and touch his face. The cold feeling made her heart ache. He should have been by her side, but now, one by one, he was lying on this cold ice bed, sleeping soundly. "Mose, don't worry. I refined a new medicine today. It should be good for your body," she said softly, leaned over, and kissed his lips. She took out the refined medicine. The transparent glass medicine bottle's blue liquid was flowing, and the spiritual aura inside could be faintly seen. She had used dozens of precious medicinal herbs to refine this bottle of medicinal liquid. In the end, she had only managed to refine half a bottle of medicinal liquid essence. Because it was a newly refined medicinal liquid, she didn't know how effective it would be. He could only let him try it out first while observing his physical condition. She twisted open the bottle, and in an instant, a strong medicinal fragrance assailed her nostrils. She gently opened his mouth and poured half of the medicinal liquid into his mouth. She raised his chin slightly and let the medicinal liquid in his mouth slide down his throat and into his body. She put away the remaining medicinal liquid and gently pressed her palm on his chest. Her spiritual force surged, helping him to unblock his meridians while guiding the spirit liquid he had consumed into every part of his meridians. Over and over again, she forced the black lotus chi in his body down. Then, she used silver needles to seal the acupuncture points on his upper body. She stayed here for the entire night. Because his body was lying on the ice bed, the cold air permeated the air. After one night, she also felt a little cold. She was worried that the cold would hurt the child in her womb. After helping him circulate his chi, she didn't dare to stay for long and first went to the side to regulate her breathing. In these few days, the people of Spirit Immortal City gradually spread the news that the mysterious people who lived in seclusion in the small house at the center of the lake in Spirit Immortal Alley in the Southern City District had bought many thousand-year-old spiritual herbs and treasures from the auction house a few days ago. Among them, the black-clothed woman who had killed the Chun family patriarch was from this small house at the center of the lake. Chapter 3761. No one had expected that the owner of the small house in the center of the lake, whom they had almost forgotten, would cause such a commotion at this time. What surprised them even more was that they knew that the owner of the small house in the center of the lake had been killed by the owner of the small house in the center of the lake. They also vaguely knew that the owner of the small house in the center of the lake was a pregnant woman in red. However, no one had ever seen the true face of the woman in red. No one knew what she looked like. No one knew who her husband's family was. No one knew which family she came from. They only knew that the people around her seemed to be very powerful. As for how powerful they were, the people of the various forces in Spirit Immortal City more or less had an idea, because before this, they had sent people to inquire about it, but none of them had returned. That evening, Fan Lin prepared to return to the small house in the center of the lake after tidying up the medicine house. After all, he had been here for the past few days and had not gone back to see his master and the others. He wanted to find time to go back today. There were not many people in the medicine house, so he went outside and said to Qin Exine, "Qin Exine, I'm going back. I'll leave the medicine house to you. I'll come over tomorrow morning." Qin Exine, who was flipping through a medical book, looked up at him and said with a smile, "No problem. You can go back. You don't have to worry about me here. However, since you're going back today, it's my turn to go back tomorrow. I haven't seen my master for a few days, so I want to go back and see her." Fan Lin smiled. No problem. He glanced at the medical book in her hand, then took out a book from his sleeve and handed it to her, saying, "This is a book I specially found. It contains some experience and convenience in midwifery. Take this book and read it." "Okay," Qin Xin replied, and took the book. The reason she studied medicine was so that she could help her master deliver the baby. After all, Fan Lin was a man, and it was inconvenient for him to be present when her master delivered the baby. She and the midwives could only help her master deliver the baby naturally. However, her master was pregnant with twins this time, so they had to be careful. "I'll ask Hui Lang to pass by when we get back," Fan Lin said. He then left through the back door after informing her. Although people in the city were secretly talking about the small house at the center of the lake, very few people knew that some of the forces that had risen in the city in recent months were from the small house at the center of the lake. Others didn't know about their relationship, and they didn't want others to know about it. Therefore, when they returned, they would be careful and try their best to avoid the eyes of others. However, when he left from the secluded path, there were already people watching him and following him. As one of the 8 captains of the Phoenix Guard, Fan Lin's main focus was on medicine. However, he did not fall behind in terms of cultivation. However, if he were to be compared to Gu Mo and the other 6 captains, his combat ability would naturally be inferior. He walked along the small path. Because the place was remote, he did not meet many people. Moreover, he also took a detour and did not go directly to the small house in the center of the lake. Therefore, when he knew that he was being watched, he was already prepared. In the dark, a dozen men in black stared at the elegant man who was walking slowly and frowned. "Are you sure you didn't make a mistake? Is this person really our target?" Chapter 3762. They actually used more than a dozen of us to kill a doctor. "It's really a waste of talent," someone whispered. Someone said in a low voice. They felt that such an elegant doctor, even if he had some cultivation, could be easily taken away by any one of them. However, the organization had sent more than 10 of them here. It was really a waste of talent. "He's finally out after 2 days. Since that's the case, I'll send him on his way," a black-clothed assassin said. He hid in the dark and stared at the slowly walking figure. He raised his hand and aimed it at Fan Lin. He pulled up his sleeves slightly, revealing a sleeve of arrows. The black-clothed man sneered. At the same time he pressed the mechanism, an almost inaudible sharp aura flew out with a murderous aura and shot straight at the back of Fan Lin's head. Whoosh! Fan Lin was still walking slowly. He heard the sound coming from behind him and released his divine sense. When he felt that the attack was only a meter away from him, he turned around unexpectedly. With a flick of his sleeve, an invisible force surged out and deflected the arrow. Whoosh! Hiss! The sharp sleeve arrow turned back with a swoosh. If it was any other time, it would not be difficult for these assassin organizations to avoid it. However, they had all underestimated their enemy. No one thought that the sleeve arrow would be reflected back. Thus, when they reacted, the sleeve arrow had already shot into the black-clothed man's forehead with a swoosh. A trace of blood seeped out and slid down. The black-clothed man's eyes widened in shock. He stared straight ahead. However, his body lost its balance and fell down. Bang! The sound of the corpse falling to the ground woke the others up. The dozen or so people were shocked. They quickly recovered and leaped out to surround Fan Lin. At this moment, the dozen or so top assassins no longer had contempt in their eyes. There was only a strong sense of fear and caution. Kill! As the cold word kill fell, the dozen or so figures quickly rushed out. The sharp swords in their hands were gleaming with cold light as they slashed across the ground, splashing cold, murderous aura. Fan Lin still had a refined smile on his face. He stretched out the hand in front of him, and a long sword slid out from under his sleeve. In the next moment, the long sword in his hand met the attacks of the black-clothed assassins. Clang! Whoosh! Swish! The clanging sound of swords clashing against each other was accompanied by sparks. The murderous aura contained in the sharp sword aura spread out in the air. As a black-clothed assassin was killed, the smell of blood in the air also rushed into his nose. Swish! Under the refraction of the cold sword, a biting cold light flashed, and the sharp sword aura, accompanied by the pressure, suddenly attacked the black-clothed assassins, shocking them in an instant. It was also at this moment that the shadow of the sword flashed past, and with a strange and unpredictable speed, it slashed across the throat of the black-clothed assassin and sealed his throat. Bang, bang, bang. Black figures fell to the ground one after another. The assassins in black stared at the scene in front of them with their eyes wide open. It was as if they had never thought that the elegant man was such a cold-faced Rakshasa. When the remaining two assassins in black saw this scene, they were so shocked that cold sweat seeped out. They retreated, wanting to escape and tell the organization that this elegant man was simply a god of death. Chapter 3763. A sharp sword stained with blood pierced through their dantian. After the sword pierced through the other person, the force behind the sword retreated and pierced through the other person, piercing the two of them together. Blood dripped down from the wound of the sword. There was no trace of blood on the black clothes, but the drops of blood on the ground were dazzling and eye-catching. Fan Lin put one hand behind his back and walked forward step by step until he was in front of the two men. He held the hilt of the sword with one hand and said gently, "I haven't killed anyone for a long time, so I'm a little rusty. I'm sorry to let you die an ugly death." As soon as his voice fell, the sharp sword in his hand was pulled out. At the same time, blood splashed out, and the two men fell to the ground. He wiped the sword in his hand and put it away. Then, he looked at the corpses on the ground. After collecting their belongings, he took out a bottle of medicinal liquid and poured it on the corpses. Sizzle! A sizzling sound was heard, and wisps of smoke rose from the ground. The corpses turned into a pool of blood in front of him, leaving only a pile of clothes on the ground. He suddenly raised his head and looked in a certain direction, revealing an inexplicable smile. The middle-aged man, who was following him in the dark, felt his heart tremble when he saw this. A chill ran up from the soles of his feet, and he couldn't help but shudder. He knew that he was here. This discovery shocked him to the core. He was a peak, immortal, venerable expert. Logically speaking, Fan Lin shouldn't have been able to discover him. After all, even those assassins didn't know that he had been following them. However, Fan Lin looked precisely at the place where he was hiding, and even revealed a smile. After seeing him kill people and destroy the corpses, the smile in his eyes was like the smile of the god of death. It was incomparably strange, and made him retreat instinctively, not daring to follow him in the dark anymore. Fan Lin smiled faintly and retracted his gaze. After destroying the corpses, he lowered his head and looked at his robe. When he saw a trace of blood splashed on the hem of his robe, he couldn't help but sigh softly. "I have to go back and take a bath first before I can meet my master." Then, he continued to walk forward leisurely. At the same time, he was calculating the income of the medicinal tower during this period. It was completely different. His smile had frightened a peak, immortal, venerable expert to the point that he broke out in cold sweat. The middle-aged man, who was frightened by Fan Lin, quickly returned to the mansion with shaky steps. He sat down in the main hall of the mansion, picked up the slightly cold water on the table, and poured himself a cup. After gulping down a few cups of water, he finally calmed down. "Brother what's wrong? What's wrong? Why is your face so pale?" A middle-aged man walked in with large strides. Seeing the middle-aged man desperately drinking water and gasping for breath and pale face, he couldn't help but be slightly surprised. "Old Lee, the people in this medicine tower are not to be trifled with. It's best if you don't provoke them." The middle-aged man with the surname, he said to the other middle-aged man after catching his breath. "Bye." Chapter 3764. But that medicine We can only look for it again, but we can't start with the people in the medicinal tower. Let's find out more. The man with the surname, he patted his shoulder and said, I'll go back and rest first. I'll be leaving tomorrow. You're leaving? The middle-aged man was surprised. Yes, I came here for the spiritual medicine. Now that the spiritual medicine has fallen into the hands of others, I can only ask around. As he spoke, he did not stay any longer and walked toward the backyard. Others were not like him and did not know how frightened he was at this moment. Even his back was drenched in cold sweat and his palms were cold. Over the past few days, aristocratic families in the city had visited the South City governor to ask about the origins of the owner of the small house in the middle of the lake. Even the West City governor and North City governor had invited him for a drink to find out about the origins of those people. In the governor's mansion, the South City governor looked at the horizon with his hands behind his back. When he thought of the two people who came to the governor's mansion that night, he could not help but sigh softly. He was not the only one who wanted to know who those people were. He also wanted to know who lived in the small house in the middle of the lake. However, they had already agreed not to disturb them unless it was absolutely necessary. When he thought of the miraculous effects of the pill, his eyes flashed. The person who could produce such a pill must have unfathomable power. He knew that he must not become enemies with them. At the same time, after Fan Lin returned to the small house in the middle of the lake, he went to Feng Jiu and told her about the medicine he had refined and some things about the medicinal tower. Then he said, Master, I heard that someone had seen the Ling flower in the savage wilderness fearsome lands. Feng Jiu, who was flipping through the medicine book, immediately raised her head when she heard this. There's news about the Ling flower? Is the news reliable? It should be very reliable. I heard about it from the people in the 1st Mercenary Corps. It was said that a family had set their eyes on the Ling flower. However, the Ling flower's guardian beast was too powerful. More than 20 people died, and they still could not pick the Ling flower. At that time, the people in the 1st Mercenary Corps were not far away, so they saw the scene. Hearing this, Feng Jiu closed the book in her hand and looked at Fan Lin. Get someone to make the arrangements. I want to go to the savage wilderness. Upon hearing this, even Lung Hua, Lung Shuang, and the others were slightly startled. Lung Hua said, Master, we can send people to pick the spirit medicine you want. You're pregnant now, so it's not suitable for you to go to that kind of place. Master, you have to take care of the baby. Lung Shuang also spoke up, worried that his master would really go personally. Feng Jiu shook his head and smiled. No one can replace me. I have to go personally. Fan Lin's expression turned serious as he asked, Master, is there no other way? Can we preserve the Ling flower and send it back? You're familiar with the medicinal properties and medical knowledge of spirit medicine. You should also know that the Ling flower can only be harvested when the first ray of sunlight appears in the morning to maximize its medicinal effects. Furthermore, it must be refined into medicine within 2 hours after it's harvested. Otherwise, the medicinal effects will be lost. Another thing is that the Ling flower blooms only once a year. If we miss this opportunity, we'll have to wait until next year. Master, are you harvesting the Ling flower to refine the spirit medicine for the Yama Lord? Lung Hua asked. Perhaps only the Yama Lord could make his master act this way. Chapter 3765. Hearing her words, they fell silent. After a long time, Lung Hua said, Since that's the case, I'll make the arrangements. Yes, you go and make the arrangements first. Also inform the others. However, they don't have to come with us. We need people here, Feng Jiu said slowly. After thinking for a while, he looked at Fan Lin. You said that you've seen the people from the 1st Mercenary Group? Fan Lin replied, Yes. In order to confirm the news, I specially went to ask their leader. Feng Jiu thought for a while and said, The leader of the 1st Mercenary Group? The one called Genie Feng? Yes. Well, since that's the case, you go and discuss with him. We'll hire them to go to the savage wilderness. Hearing this, Fan Lin paused and glanced at Lung Hua before saying, Yes, I'll go there later. When do you plan to leave, Master? Tomorrow. Thus, following her decision, Lung Hua, Fan Lin, and the others began to prepare. That night, they called everyone back and told them to pick out a few people who could travel with their master. Master, you only plan to bring a few people to the savage wilderness? Chi Kong, who had rushed back from the East City Lord's mansion, looked at Feng Jiu and said worriedly, Master, I'm afraid you won't be back so soon. You're going to give birth in a few months. If you go out at this time, won't you? The first mercenary group will escort us to the savage wilderness. Together with Du Fan and the others, it'll be enough. Feng Jiu said casually. After all, they came from that place. Even if it was dangerous, it was nothing to them. Chi Kang's expression turned serious. He looked at Feng Jiu and said, Why don't I arrange the things at hand and go with you, Master? If Master was not pregnant, it would be one thing. But now that she was pregnant and had to go to such a dangerous place, it was really worrying. Feng Jiu smiled. You just took over the East City District. You can't leave, and you can't leave. Don't worry. With them around, it'll be fine. She paused and stroked her bulging belly with one hand. She smiled and said, Besides, this is my child. I know what to do. Then Master should bring 2 midwives with you on this trip. Just in case, Chi Kong added. Hearing this, Feng Jiu burst out laughing. She looked at Chi Kang's frozen face and shook her head. She jokingly said, Chi Kong, you'll get old easily if you keep worrying about this and that. Also, I've already said that I'll be gone for at most 2 months. If I'm fast, I'll be back in about a month and a half. I've only been pregnant for about 5 months. I won't give birth so soon. In order to prevent him from continuing, she waved her hand and smiled. Okay, I asked you to come back tonight just to tell you that you have a lot of things to do in the East District. Go back. Seeing this, Chi Kong opened his mouth but didn't say anything in the end. He just looked at Du Fan and Lung Hua and said, Then I'll go first. You have to take good care, Master. We know. They responded. Master, I'll go first. He bowed to Feng Jiu and left. Chapter 3766. Fan Lin didn't stay long because he had to go out. That night, he went to the 1st Mercenary Corps to find Jin Yifeng to discuss the matter of going to the savage wilderness. Lung Shuang and Lung Hua spent the night preparing the things they needed for the journey. By the time everything was settled, it was almost dawn. Lung Shuang entered the mansion as soon as the sky brightened. Compared to the busy people, Feng Jiu took a nap. Hence, after breakfast, he took Lung Hua and the others out of the city in a carriage. On the mountain road outside the city, the 1st Mercenary Corps was already waiting there. They arrived early and had been waiting for a while, but the person they were waiting for didn't come out. One of the mercenaries couldn't help but ask, Leader, that person only told us to wait here. Who is our employer? Why isn't he here yet? Jin Yifeng, who was resting under a tree, didn't open his eyes. He said, Just wait. You'll know in a while. Leader, we only picked 20 of our brothers to go to the savage wilderness. Will something happen? One of the men couldn't help but ask. Although they had been to that kind of place more than 10 times, they had never dared to rush in with only 20 people. However, the person who gave the mission said that they didn't need so many people and only needed to pick 20 people to go with them. They really couldn't figure it out. Hearing this, Jin Yifeng opened his eyes. His hand was still wrapped around the sword in front of his chest. He didn't move and just looked at everyone. Our mission is to lead the way and protect. If we really meet with danger that we can't solve, the employer will probably help us. However, whether they have the ability to do so, I'll make the final decision after meeting them. Leader, what if the employer isn't strong enough? Do we still accept this mission? A mercenary asked. If they don't have the ability to do so, then this mission is invalid and half of the commission they paid will go to us. So, overall, we won't lose anything. Let's wait and see, Jin Yifeng said, thinking as he waited. The person who came to talk to him was a man named Fan Lin from the Medicine Tower. When he told him about the strange rules and the mission, he was surprised. But last night, he didn't tell him how many people their employer would bring with them. And how strong was he? However, the commission he had to pay was considerable. Therefore, he was looking forward to this mission. Leader, after this mission is completed, we won't have to go out for missions this year, right? A man asked with a smile as he looked at the leader under the tree. Yes, we can rest after this mission. It's almost the end of the year. Genie Feng looked at them and asked, have you sent the commission back home? Hearing this, a burly man grinned. I got last night and sent it back. My wife was worried when she got the commission and kept asking me about it. She even prepared this for me. He patted his chest, and a clanging sound could be heard. It seemed to be something like black iron. Chapter 3767. The commission this time is high. The other brothers are envious that we were chosen. What a pity. The employer only asked for 20 people. Another mercenary said. As soon as he finished speaking, he saw a carriage slowly approaching. He immediately stood up and shouted, Captain, look, there's a carriage coming. Could it be the employer of this mission? Jean E. Feng, who was under the tree, heard this and looked towards the city gate. He then stood up and shouted in a low voice, line up. As soon as he finished speaking, the team quickly lined up in 2 straight rows. The carriage slowly approached. The driver was Lung Hua. Qin Xin and Lung Shuang sat in the carriage with Feng Jiao. On the left and right were Du Fan, Gu Mo, Hui Lang, and Luo Yu. They were all in the dark. Ying had not appeared yet. Captain Jean. Du Fan gently fanned himself with the fan in his hand as he walked towards Genie Feng. He smiled and said, we'll have to trouble you on this journey. Genie Feng looked at them. His eyes flashed as he asked, just a few of you? He originally thought that it would be a group of a clan. However, he didn't expect that there would only be 1 carriage and only a few people. His brows slightly furrowed for a moment. It must be known that there were less than 30 people, including them. It wouldn't be easy for such a group to go into the depths of the savage wasteland. We have enough people. Du Fan smiled. He looked at Genie Feng and said, let me introduce myself first. I am Du Fan. This is Lung Hua, Gu Mo, Hui Lang, and Luo Yu. Du Fan paused. He looked at him and asked, how does Captain Jean plan to go into the savage wilderness? Hearing his introduction, Genie Feng looked at them. He then looked away and said, the savage wilderness is extremely dangerous. I want to know how much strength you have to protect yourselves. Our strength is above all of you. Du Fan said with a smile. It was obviously the truth. However, in the ears of the 20 mercenaries and Genie Feng, they felt that he was being arrogant. After all, they didn't believe that their strength would be stronger than mercenaries who had been out on missions all year round. Young Master Du, the savage wilderness ominous ground is not an ordinary place. If you are not careful, you might even lose your life inside. I hope. Before Genie Feng could finish speaking, he paused. This was because the man in front of him, who had a concerned smile on his face, had suddenly released a powerful pressure. This pressure instantly stunned him, causing him to be unable to speak. He only knew that the blood in his body was surging with the pressure, and other than him, no one else around him had noticed. To be able to release the pressure only to himself, to be able to control it without making a sound, just what kind of cultivation level did he have to be able to control such pressure so proficiently? His heart suddenly shook, and sweat seeped out of his forehead. After a while, the pressure that was as heavy as Mount Tai retracted. His legs couldn't help but soften, and he almost fell down. Commander Jean, our men are more than capable of protecting themselves. You don't have to worry about them. Du Fan reached out to help him up with a smile on his face. Genie Feng calmed himself down and said, I understand. Then let's set off. However, if we want to go to the savage wilderness ominous ground from here, I suggest that flying will save more time. Chapter 3768. Without waiting for Du Fan to step forward, Lung Hua, who was driving the carriage, got off first and lifted the curtain of the carriage. Genie Feng and the rest looked towards the carriage and saw a woman in black walk out with her head lowered. She jumped off the carriage, followed by a woman in white who also walked out with her head lowered, avoiding the roof of the carriage. Looking at the 2 women, they thought the former is dressed in tight black clothes and has a cold and intimidating aura. She seems more like a personal bodyguard. The latter is dressed in white and has an outstanding appearance and temperament. Could she be the master they spoke of? Just as he was thinking, he saw the two beautiful women, one in black and one in white, lift the curtain of the carriage, and the other supported a red-clothed woman from inside. However, when they saw the red-clothed woman, they couldn't help but be startled, and their faces were filled with astonishment. The reason for that was because the red-clothed woman's figure was round, and her belly was slightly bulging. From the looks of it, she should be several months pregnant. Yet, such a woman actually came out from the carriage. Could it be that she was also someone who was going to the savage wilderness ominous grounds? Young Master Du, you can't be telling me that this madam is going as well, right? Jin Yifeng's expression darkened. He felt that this was child's play. How could a pregnant woman go to such a dangerous place? That's right. Du Fan replied with a smile and introduced, "This is my master. Commander Jin, you can address my master as Madame Xianyuan. She's already several months pregnant, but she needs the Shui Ling flower, so she has no choice but to go out." If possible, they didn't want their master to come out like this. After all, they couldn't be at ease going to such a place. Jin Yifeng's face darkened as he said, "Even cultivators like us have to be extremely careful in that kind of place, and we don't dare to say that there won't be any accidents. You actually want to bring a pregnant woman in? You're trying to kill her." Hearing this, Feng Jiu smiled, and her clear eyes fell on Jin Yifeng. She slowly said, "Commander Jin, there's no need to worry. Although I'm pregnant, it won't stop me from entering the ominous, desolate grounds." Hearing the voice, Jin Yifeng turned around and looked at the lady in red. His eyes flashed, and a hint of surprise appeared in his eyes. He had traveled extensively and had seen many beauties. The cold and elegant woman in tight black clothes and the gentle woman in white clothes were both rare beauties. But compared to the woman in red before him, they seemed to pale in comparison. Even though the woman before him was pregnant, her peerlessly beautiful appearance was exquisite and seductive. Her languid expression carried a wisp of charm, and when her clear eyes swept over, they flowed with a moving brilliance. However, even though her appearance was peerlessly beautiful and her figure could topple cities, it caused others to not have the slightest thought of profaning her. It was all because she possessed a peerlessly noble and awe-inspiring aura. That sort of awe-inspiring majesty that seemed to be innate in her bones, accompanied by a sweep of her clear eyes, instantly caused others to avoid her gaze and lower their heads. She was as dazzling as the sun, and no one dared to look at her directly. "Greetings, Madame Xianyuan." Jin Yifeng hurriedly cupped his hands and bowed. After bowing almost instinctively, he was stunned again, because the respect and reverence he felt from the bottom of his heart towards her as an expert who had occupied a high position for a long time caused him to be slightly stunned. Chapter 3769. Yes, about half a year ago, I led a team to the depths of the savage wilderness. However, the terrain there was extremely dangerous, and there were also powerful beasts guarding it. We couldn't get close. As he spoke, he glanced at Feng Jiu and hesitated before saying, "I don't think it's suitable for Madame to go there." Hearing this, Feng Jiu smiled slightly. "It's fine. Leader Jin, you just need to lead the way. My people will take care of the rest." Seeing that she was so insistent, Jin Yifeng didn't say anything else. He only said, "We'll prepare to fly on our swords. If Madame feels unwell and needs to rest, just call us. Then let's take the flying ship." Feng Jiu smiled. With a wave of his sleeve, a flying ship appeared beside them. Seeing that low-key and luxurious flying ship, the mercenaries' eyes flashed. A spaceship like this was worth a lot of money. They were originally worried that Madame Xianyuan would have trouble moving around due to her big belly. However, it seemed that they had prepared beforehand. Feng Jiu, Qin Xen, Lung Shuang, and the others boarded the flying ship first. Lung Hua and Gu Mo followed behind. When Ying Yi, dressed in black, suddenly appeared beside Hui Lang, the mercenaries couldn't help but be surprised. They sized him up. Where did this person come from? "Everyone, please." Du Fan gestured for them to board the flying ship. Everyone looked at each other before boarding the flying ship one after another. After boarding the flying ship, they saw that the furnishings and things inside were all first class. Their hearts trembled slightly. The employer this time wasn't an ordinary rich person. Every item on the flying ship was priceless. It wasn't something that ordinary people could get their hands on. As the flying ship started, it slowly rose until it reached the clouds. It shuttled through the clouds and headed towards the savage wilderness. Compared to Lung Hua and the others who were relaxed, the 20 mercenaries were more restrained. Jin Yifeng glanced at the crowd and said, "Sit down." Only after the commander had spoken did everyone sit down. They looked at the woman in red who was leisurely lying on the soft couch, then looked at the two beautiful women sitting beside her. They looked at each other in dismay. They had been on so many missions, but this was the first time that they didn't even need to fly their own swords. If they continued at this pace, they would have an easy time until they entered the savage wilderness. Compared to the other mercenaries, Captain Jin Yifeng was secretly sizing them up. The more he interacted with them, the more he felt that they were not ordinary. How could people not know that there were such people in Spirit Immortal City? He narrowed his eyes and thought to himself, "The owner of the small house in the center of the lake has been the talk of the town recently, but no one has seen his true face, and no one knows his origin." But now, he vaguely guessed that their employer this time was the owner of the small house in the center of the lake, and that Madame Xianyuan was the owner of the small house in the center of the lake. However, he had never imagined that the mysterious and unfathomable medicine tower was actually related to the small building at the center of the lake. He reckoned that no one in Spirit Immortal City would have thought of it. The flying ship shuttled through the clouds without stopping to rest. It wasn't until the sky gradually darkened that the flying ship found a place to stop. "We'll rest here tonight. We'll continue tomorrow," Du Fan said to everyone, then smiled and said, "I'll have to trouble the brothers of the mercenary group to see if there are any wild animals that could be stewed into soup when hunting. Help us catch one back." Chapter 3770. The mercenaries disembarked from the spaceship and quickly set up a fire in the surrounding area. They also caught some prey. Because of Du Fan's instructions, the mercenaries prepared a wild pheasant and gave it to Feng Jiao and the others. Therefore, Qin Xian added some nourishing herbs into the pheasant and boiled it into chicken soup for Feng Jiao. Under the night sky, the night breeze was chilly. After eating, the 20 mercenaries sat around the fire and took turns keeping watch. Feng Jiao returned to the cabin to rest first. Du Fan and the others also left Ying Yi and Hui Lang to keep watch. The night passed peacefully. The next morning, they continued their journey. 2 days later, in the evening, their spaceship stopped in a small forest. They were resting in the forest when they heard cries for help and screams. Then, they heard chaotic footsteps running towards them. "Help! Help! Help!" Immediately, the 20 mercenaries quickly surrounded Feng Jiao and cautiously looked in the direction of the sound. They saw a few children around 6 or 7 years old in tattered clothes crying and running in the forest. They wiped their tears as they ran. When they fell, they scrambled to their feet and continued running. When they saw Feng Jiao and the others in front, they quickly ran in their direction. "Help!" Jin Yifeng saw that the people chasing the children were 2 cultivators and couldn't help but frown. The children had shocking wounds on their bodies, but even so, they still ran very fast. At this moment, one of the cultivators quickly jumped in front of the children and blocked their path. "Let's see where you can run to," the tall and thin cultivator said sinisterly. As if he didn't see the mercenaries and the spaceship, he approached one of the children and grabbed him by the collar, lifting him up and slamming him heavily to the ground. The child cried out in alarm. His hands and feet curled up slightly to protect his body when he fell to the ground. At the same time, he rolled towards the mercenaries and shouted in panic, "Help! Help us!" Seeing this scene, the mercenaries didn't move. They only frowned and secretly kept their guard up. Why would there suddenly be a few children being chased by cultivators in this place? These children only had a low cultivation base, but their movement techniques were extremely fast. Furthermore, to be able to survive the pursuit of the 2 cultivators, it was clear that they were not ordinary children. Their mission this time was to protect Madame Xianyuan and at the same time bring them to look for the Shuelinghua. Therefore, if it was possible, they did not want to get involved in other unrelated matters. Fengjiu sat by the fire roasting game. She didn't even look over there. She just seriously roasted the meat while adding spices. When it was done, she even cut off a piece with a knife and tasted it. Ah, pooh! A child was kicked in the abdomen, and his body flew towards the mercenaries. At the same time, he spat out a mouthful of blood. He cried out in pain, his body twitched and instinctively curled up. Du Fan walked out and gently waved the fan in his hand. He looked at the children and the two cultivators with a scornful smile. If you want to fight, just do it. Why do you have to put on such a clumsy show? Chapter 3771. Swoosh, swoosh. The arrow shot out from the sleeve was extremely short, and its speed was extremely fast. Moreover, it was different from the sleeve arrows of the past. The sleeve arrow shot out from the child's arm was the size of an iron wire, but it was extremely hard and sharp. When a sleeve arrow shot out, only two extremely fast cold lights could be seen shooting out. The arrow was not shot at the mercenaries, but at Fengjiu, who was roasting meat by the fire. Be careful! The arrow shot past Genie Feng's cheek. He could even feel the sharp aura of the arrow. His cheek felt as if it had been cut by a sharp wind blade, and a trace of blood seeped out. He wanted to block the two streaks of cold light, but no matter how fast he was, he could not outrun the attack. He could only shout out a warning. Fengjiu was still sitting there without moving, as if he did not notice anything. He did not care about the two streaks of cold light at all. Just as the two small sleeve arrows flew past Genie Feng and were about a meter away from him, they were blocked by Du Fan's fan. Clang! The sound of metal colliding rang out. After colliding with the fan in Du Fan's hand, they fell to the ground. They were two sharp sleeve arrows that were as thin as iron wires. Moreover, the arrowheads were emitting a pitch-black light. Du Fan smiled, but there wasn't the slightest hint of a smile in his narrowed eyes. He looked at the child who quickly jumped up from the ground and the black-clothed cultivators who emerged from the surroundings. He slowly walked past the mercenaries and walked to the front, saying, "You guys have some guts." His soft words were filled with cold, killing intent. He looked at the people who surrounded them and asked, "How do you want to die? Have you decided?" A black-clothed man, wearing a mask, walked out from the group of black-clothed men. He stared at Du Fan with a sinister gaze and asked, "Do you know who we are? You've been following us since last night. Who else could you be but from that assassin organization?" Du Fan glanced at the children as he spoke. He smiled and said coldly, "I just didn't expect you to use such small children." Hearing this, the eyes of the black-robed man, who was the leader, flickered. Those who are related to the medicine tower are indeed not simple. He took a step back and glanced at the low-key yet luxurious spaceship. He raised his hand, and the men in black didn't step forward. Instead, they raised the hidden arrows in their hands. Every arrow here is smeared with poison. Once you are grazed, you will bleed to death from your 7 orifices. If you don't want to die too miserably, you'd better surrender obediently. His voice paused and his gaze swept across the crowd. Then he said in a sinister voice, "As long as you press the button, every sleeve arrow will shoot out more than just a few. Oh, so you want to attack us because of our relationship with the medicine tower?" Fengjiu looked back at the person who spoke, his eyes full of surprise. Not bad. The leader was surprised by Fengjiu's beauty. Looking at her gorgeous face, he said, "Your heads, as well as the heads of those people from the medicine tower, have all been added to the kill list." "I see." Fengjiu nodded in understanding. Then he said to Du Fan and the others, "Kill them. Also, send a message back. Tell them that I want this organization to disappear." "Yes." Chapter 3772. The 20 mercenaries widened their eyes in shock as they watched the corpses fall one by one. A huge wave of shock surged in their hearts, and their bodies trembled almost imperceptibly. The scene in front of them was like an Azura harvesting lives. The other party did not have the chance to attack at all. They did not even have time to react before they fell one by one. The sword light swept out like a shadow, and the movement technique was like a ghost. In the blink of an eye, the 100 or so black-clothed assassins surrounding them were all killed. There was no hesitation in attacking. After one round, they only felt a gust of wind sweep past them. When they looked again, they saw corpses strewn all over the ground, and Madame Xinyuan was still standing beside her, as if she had not moved at all. Jin Yifeng's eyes narrowed when he saw the scene in front of him. If he had known that Du Fan's strength was very strong after he had witnessed their strength that day, then the scene in front of him was even more shocking. This kind of strength was not just very strong, but extremely strong. Even in the Spirit Immortal City, there were not many who could be compared to this kind of strength. No, even the powerhouses of the soaring Firmament Immortal sect would not be a match for them. In an instant, the mercenaries looked at Fengjiu and the others with reverence in their eyes. This kind of strength was enough to make them revere them. Leader Jin, I'll have to trouble your men to clean up. Du Fan smiled. His gentle voice broke the mercenaries' stiff expressions and allowed them to return to their senses. Yes, I'll get them to clean up now. Almost instinctively, Jin Yifeng's response turned into obedience. He returned to his senses and quickly arranged for everyone to clean up the scene. No one had any objections. No one felt that it was too much to ask the top mercenaries to do such a thing. They almost instinctively obeyed and quickly cleaned up the scene. After the corpses were cleaned up, Jin Yifeng took out a large bag of items from the assassins and handed it over. He said to Fengjiu, Madame Xinyuan, "These are the valuables from those people." Fengjiu cut a piece of meat and ate it. He glanced at the valuables and slowly said, "These things are for your brothers. Just keep it." Hearing this, Jin Yifeng was stunned and said, "This is against the rules. Moreover, the commission that Madame Xinyuan paid us for this trip is very high. If we didn't hunt it ourselves, the treasures will belong to you." She smiled and said, "It's fine. We don't lack these things anyway. Take it. After all, it's quite inconvenient to protect a pregnant woman like me." But Jin Yifeng still wanted to say something, but someone put a hand on his shoulder. "Regiment Commander Jin, my master said to take it, so just take it." Du Fan patted him on the shoulder and said with a smile, "However, Regiment Commander Jin, you have to remind me not to say a word about what we've seen and heard on this trip. My master is a person who prefers peace and quiet. He doesn't like to be disturbed." "Yes," Jin Yifeng replied. He glanced at Fengjiu and didn't refuse. After thanking him, he took the items to the mercenaries and gave them a share. At the same time, he passed down the message. Chapter 3773. Madame Xinyuan, did you already know that we were being targeted? He noticed that she had a calm expression on her face, as if everything was under her control. His heart skipped a beat. Could it be that they already knew that they were being targeted by the assassin organization? "You can say that." Fengjiu smiled and said, "I knew that the assassin organization was targeting the medicine tower, but I didn't think that they would be able to find out about our relationship with the medicine tower." Hearing this, Jin Yifeng recalled what the leader had said. They were already on the kill list, and his expression froze. "Now that you're on the kill list, I'm afraid that there will be more people targeting you in the future. It would be one thing if they didn't know, but since they know, we'll just let them cross our names off the kill list." Fengjiu said casually, then smiled and said, "Why don't we destroy a few of their forces to teach them a lesson?" Leng Hua heard this and said, "Master, don't worry. I've already sent a message back. They'll deal with it as soon as possible." Fengjiu replied. After eating some food, he stood up and walked around. After a while, he returned to the spaceship to rest. They didn't encounter anything else in the following days and arrived at the savage wilderness fearsome grounds peacefully. Because they didn't recognize the place where the Shueling flower was, they could only walk into the savage wilderness fearsome grounds from the spaceship. "Madame Xinyuan, there are all kinds of ferocious beasts here. You have to be careful of small poisonous insects, snakes, and ants. Some plants are also poisonous, so you can't touch them casually. Wild fruits can't be eaten casually either. Although Genie Feng felt that they should know this, he still reminded them. Feng Jiu smiled and replied, we'll be careful. Then we'll enter from here. Every time we come back, we'll leave a mark in the forest. We just have to find a mark and follow the path. As Genie Feng spoke, 10 of the mercenaries walked at the back, 10 of them walked at the front, and Feng Jiu and the rest walked in the middle. After all, she was pregnant with twins. Even walking on a flat road was tiring, let alone in a place like the forest. Feng Jiu walked with them for an entire morning, and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. Master, why don't we stop and rest? Lung Hua and the others' hearts ached. They had only rested for a short while, and they were worried that their master's body couldn't take it. Feng Jiu chuckled. I'm not that weak. I'm just a little tired. I'm still in good health. After all, she was anxious to find a Xueling. She didn't want to stay here for too long. First, she was worried that the Xueling flower would be plucked by others. Second, she hoped that after this matter was settled, she would go back. She wanted was to take care of her pregnancy. Genie Feng turned around and glanced at Feng Jiu. Madam Xinyuan, let's stop and take a break. There's a spring not far ahead. You can wash your face or something. Feng Jiu, hey. Thus, the group walked forward for about 100 meters before stopping, because there was already a team resting at the mouth of the spring. Chapter 3774. No one objected to this arrangement and sat down to rest. Feng Jiu sat under the tree and took out some water to drink. Then, she leaned against the tree and rested with her eyes half closed. She didn't open her eyes until she heard a strange voice. Not far away, Genie Feng was greeting and laughing with a middle-aged man. It seemed like they knew each other. Beside the middle-aged man were 2 men and 2 women. At this moment, they were sizing them up. When their gazes landed on her stomach, one of the women cried out in surprise. She's pregnant, and yet she came to the savage wilderness? Exciter, don't be so presumptuous. The middle-aged man shouted and nodded apologetically at Feng Jiu. Madam, please don't take offense. The little girl doesn't know any better. Feng Jiu smiled. It's fine. What she said is the truth. She retracted her gaze and covered her stomach with one hand. She closed her eyes and rested. Leader Jean, we're considered acquaintances. There's no need to be so distant. I've asked someone to prepare some barbecued meat. Why don't you come and eat together? The middle-aged man invited with a smile. It's fine. I've already asked my men to hunt. There'll be food soon. We didn't come out on our own this time. We have a mission, so it's inconvenient. Genie Feng declined with a smile. Hearing this, the middle-aged man nodded. Since that's the case, I won't force you. We won't disturb you any further. He cupped his hands and looked at Feng Jiu and the others. Only then did he bring his men back to rest. As they walked back, one of the women couldn't help but whisper, "Those people are so strange. They actually brought a pregnant woman to a place like this. Moreover, they don't even add up to 30 people. It's not even half of our team." The man beside her looked serious and said, "Other than the 20 mercenaries, the others don't look like guards. They look more like the young masters and young ladies of aristocratic families. This is the first time I've heard of a pregnant woman daring to come to the savage wilderness. She's really too reckless." The other man shook his head as he spoke. Even a skilled cultivator would not be able to escape unscathed in this place. However, that woman was pregnant and her belly was already so big, yet she still dared to come to such a place. All right, don't meddle too much in other people's business. Take care of yourself. Don't forget why we're here this time," the middle-aged man said, glancing at them warningly. The few people who originally wanted to say something, after hearing his words, did not say anything more and returned to their resting area to sit down. However, their gazes still could not help but look towards Feng Jiu and the others. The 2 groups of people rested here until the next morning. The mercenaries continued to lead Feng Jiu and the others forward. However, not long after they left, the group behind them caught up with them. "Leader, why are they taking the same path as us?" One of the mercenaries looked back and asked in a low voice. Jin Yifeng's eyes flashed. He looked back and said, "Maybe it's just along the way. After all, this place is so big. Just because they're walking behind us doesn't mean that they're taking the same path as us. Even if they're taking the same path, they're going their own ways." Chapter 3775. Captain, we've been the ones fighting in the front whenever there's any danger along the way, and they've been taking advantage of us without doing anything. It's really immoral, a mercenary said as he glanced at the people behind him with a terrible expression. Captain, why don't we let them go first? Or we can ask them what they're up to. Another mercenary chimed in. Yeah, we've been killing the ferocious beasts in the front. Our brothers are all injured and stained with blood, but they've been following behind us without doing anything. They're not our employers, so it's really annoying that they're taking advantage of us like this. And they've been following us all the way, as if we're being watched. We can see their team everywhere. I really don't know what they're up to. Hearing them talking about this, Jin Yifeng furrowed his brows slightly. In fact, he was aware of his brother's dissatisfaction. They were paid to do their jobs, and protecting Madame Xianyuan and the others was their job. But the team behind them had been following them all the time. It looked like they were also protecting them and leading the way for them. Most importantly, the other party had been following them leisurely, as if they were doing it on purpose. Thinking of this, he turned his head around to take a look. After a moment of silence, he said, "We'll just walk our own path and do what we're supposed to do. It's the same even if they're not following us. So you guys shouldn't pay attention to them. Just treat them as if they're invisible. The path toward heaven is not ours, and they're free to do whatever they want. From another perspective, even if they're not following us, we'll still kill the ferocious beasts when we encounter them. So it's the same whether they're following us or not." He tried to make them understand and not pay attention to the details. In his opinion, all they needed to do was to do what they were supposed to do, regardless of whether the team behind them was following them or not. If that was the case, why should they complain that the team behind them was taking advantage of them? Thinking this way was actually a problem with their mentality. The mercenaries hadn't fully adjusted their mentality yet. But Captain, your captain is right. Feng Jiu chuckled. He glanced at Jin Yifeng and the other mercenaries and said with a smile, "You guys should learn from your captain. His attitude is very proper." Hearing her speak, the mercenaries were a little embarrassed and lowered their heads for a moment. After all, they were fussing about those unpresentable things and were indeed a little narrow-minded. Jin Yifeng didn't expect her to speak. After being stunned for a moment, he walked up to her side with a smile and asked, "Madame Xianyuan, you didn't rest much along the way. Is your body okay with walking with everyone like this?" "Well, it's okay. I'm in good health. I'll walk more as an exercise. It's good for pregnant people." She smiled and walked at a leisurely pace with one hand covering her stomach. Lung Shuang and Qin Xian, who were walking on her left and right, cut off the surrounding branches to prevent the branches from scratching their master. "Regiment Commander Jin, how much longer until we reach the location of the Ling flower? After such a long time, would the Ling flower still be there, or will it be taken away by someone else?" Chapter 3776. Although Fan Lin had told her that the place where the Ling flower was found by the mercenaries was extremely dangerous and guarded by a powerful beast, it was impossible for an average person to pluck it. However, the world was so big and there were so many powerful people everywhere. No one could guarantee that the Ling flower would still be there without being plucked. Jin Yifeng pondered for a moment and said, "It's hard to say. I can't guarantee that it's still there. However, there hasn't been any news of the Ling flower appearing outside, so it's very likely that it's still there because the beast guarding it has reached the 7th level of the divine beast. It's extremely ferocious, and its combat power is even more shocking." He didn't give a definite answer because he wasn't sure either. However, he knew that the Ling flower was very difficult to pick. Otherwise, they wouldn't have dared to pick it when they saw it. Thinking of this, he looked at Feng Jiu and asked, "Madame Xianyuan, I heard that if the Ling flower is kept in a special ice box after being picked, its medicinal effects will not fade away. Is that true? Fengjiu shook her head slightly and said, That's only said to sell the shueling flower to some people who collect spiritual herbs for auction. The shueling flower's medicinal effects are very unique. Even if it's kept in a special icebox, part of its medicinal effects will still fade away. Of course, it doesn't mean that the medicinal effects will be completely lost. It's just that compared to using it in a special time, the medicinal effects will be greatly reduced. The shueling flower's growth period is 100 years. After 100 years of growth, it will bloom. The flowering period is 1 year. It's most effective when it's in full bloom. She smiled and continued. However, the shueling flower is a precious spiritual herb. Unless it's an extremely precious medicine, it's usually not used. Hearing her words, Jin Yifeng's eyes flashed and asked, Madame Xinyuan, you're so proficient in medicinal herbs. Are you a pharmacist? You can say that. She smiled and didn't elaborate. Jin Yifeng thought of Fan Lin from the medicine building and how the second master of the Yu family, who had been injured in the heart, was saved. He vaguely guessed that this Madame Xinyuan in front of him should have good medical skills. Perhaps it was because they had traveled together for a long time, but seeing that the mercenaries in front had stopped to rest, the middle-aged leader of the family who didn't come forward originally brought a few young men and women, as well as an old man to the front. Regiment Commander Jin. The middle-aged man smiled and cupped his hands together. He looked at Fengjiu and the others and nodded slightly. Ouyang family head, what's the matter? Jin Yifeng asked, his gaze landing on the middle-aged man. It's like this. Along the way, I realized that we seem to be taking the same path, so I'd like to take the liberty to ask, why don't we travel together? This way, if you encounter a ferocious beast attack, we can also help. As soon as the middle-aged man finished speaking, the elderly man beside him stroked his beard and smiled. Commander Jin, thanks to you, we had an easier time walking at the back. However, we want to say that it's not that we want to follow you all the way. We're going to the depths of the forest, and we're taking the same path. So, we hope that you can reconsider. If we're going the same way, we'll travel together. This way, if anything happens, we can help each other. Chapter 3777. Fengjiu looked up at the old man and raised her eyebrows. You want to travel with us? Actually, we see that we're all going the same way. Since that's the case, we can't keep walking at the back and let you block the danger in front. The old man said with a smile on his face. He looked amiable, but his attitude towards Fengjiu was not very respectful. After all, in his eyes, she was just a woman, and a pregnant woman who was still restless. So it's like that. Fengjiu replied indifferently. She looked at the old man with a smile and said, If you don't think it's good to keep walking behind us, then you can walk in front of us. Hearing this, the old man was startled. A trace of astonishment flashed across his eyes. He clearly did not expect her to say this. The young men and women beside her also looked at Fengjiu in astonishment. Normally speaking, if they had already said so, shouldn't they have gladly agreed? After all, there were close to 100 people around them, and all of them were top experts. On the other hand, they had 20 mercenaries, a few other young masters, 2 women, and the pregnant woman in red. It was one thing for them to walk outside, but it would be very difficult for them to enter the depths of the forest. Now that they had extended an olive branch to them, the other party did not appreciate it. When the middle-aged man with the surname Ouyang heard Fengjiu's words, he frowned slightly. He felt that this woman was all beauty and no brains. Originally, he saw that she had an extraordinary bearing and exuded the aura of a superior. He thought that she was someone important, but who knew that she would speak like this? His impression of her immediately plummeted. In the cultivation world, there was no lack of beautiful women. Even if this woman had a heaven-shaking appearance, she only had looks but no wisdom or strength. She would only become a plaything for the strong. They did not need to pay too much attention to this kind of woman. Thus, he said to Jin Yifeng, Captain Jin, since it's like this, we'll be going first. With that, he left with his men. Jin Yifeng shook his head inwardly as he watched them turn and leave. He could tell that they were extremely displeased by Madame Xuanyuan's response. However, In his opinion, Madame Xianyuan did not have any ill intentions. She was merely speaking the truth. If he was embarrassed to follow behind them, then he would walk in front of them. On the main road, everyone went their own way, and no one would say anything more. However, when the people from the Ouyang family heard Madame Xianyuan's words, they felt that she did not know how to appreciate favors. That was because they simply did not know how powerful the people beside Madame Xianyuan were. That night, Feng Jiao and the others rested on the spot. After entering this place, they all rested at night and walked during the day. This way, they could have a good rest and avoid potential dangers at night. As for the people of the Ouyang clan, because they were one step ahead of them, they didn't stop to rest that night and continued to move forward. Chapter 3778. Madame Xianyuan. There's a faint smell of blood in the surroundings. There are also traces of blood in the weeds. I suggest we stop for a while. I'll send someone to scout ahead before we continue. Jin Yifeng cautiously said to Feng Jiao. Feng Jiao nodded when she heard this. All right, let's rest here for a while. She was also a little tired from walking. The ground in the forest was uneven and there were many branches and weeds. Her body couldn't take it after walking for a long time. Seeing that she agreed, Jin Yifeng immediately ordered 2 mercenaries to scout ahead. The others stood guard in the surroundings in case danger suddenly appeared. Feng Jiao found a place to sit down. She took out a spiritual fruit and ate it to replenish her energy. She casually scanned her surroundings and paused when her gaze swept past a certain spot. Mistress, are you hungry? Do you want to eat some porridge or something? Qin Xian asked from the side. No need, I'll just eat a fruit. After walking for such a long time, her appetite wasn't good. Even if she cooked something, she wouldn't be able to eat it. Leng Hua and the others also saw the leopard lying in the grass staring at them. However, they didn't take any action. In their opinion, as long as the leopard didn't threaten their mistress and didn't take the initiative to attack, they wouldn't kill it. Moreover, with their strength, killing a leopard was only a matter of a moment. Mistress, if you're really tired from walking, let Tunyan come out and carry you. Leng Hua looked at Feng Jiao and said. He saw that his mistress had difficulty sitting down with her big belly, let alone walking with them. However, they had reminded her several times along the way, but she still insisted on walking. Feng Jiao couldn't help but chuckle when she heard Leng Hua mention this again. Leng Hua, you're really like an old mother. How many times have you nagged me along the way? She smiled and shook her head. Don't worry, I know my body well. Although it's tiring to walk like this, it won't do any harm to me and the child in my belly. On the contrary, since I'm pregnant with twins, it'll be easier for me to give birth in the future if I walk more. She leaned against the tree and exhaled softly. If I'm a little tired now, it'll be safer for me to give birth in the future. What's more, I'm a cultivator. How can I not be able to handle such a small matter? While they were chatting, the mercenaries weren't in the mood to listen because they were all on high alert. Their eyes were fixed on their surroundings and the 2 leopards lying in the grass staring at them. The weeds in this area were slightly dry and had a reddish-yellow color. From afar, they looked like withered weeds, but in fact, the roots of these weeds still contained moisture. However, the color of the weeds was very similar to the leopard's half-golden fur. They were also the leopard's camouflage tools. If it weren't for the powerful and ferocious aura emitted by the 2 leopards, they probably wouldn't have discovered them so quickly. However, what puzzled them was that the 2 leopards, which were estimated to be at the level of divine beasts, were actually lying in the grass about 100 meters away from them, staring at them, but they didn't make any further movements. What do you think these 2 leopards want to do? A vigilant mercenary asked the person beside him in a low voice. He was extremely puzzled. Chapter 3779. Yes, we know. Our leader has also instructed us. Their leader had already secretly instructed them that Madame Xianyuan was pregnant. No matter what happened, she was to be taken care of first. Some of them already had wives and children. When they saw Madame Xianyuan coming to such a dangerous place with her pregnant belly, they naturally paid more attention to her. Genie Feng, who was leading the mercenaries to pay attention to their surroundings, also felt a little strange at this moment. He had been traveling for so many years and had seen all kinds of situations, but he had never seen a situation where two powerful leopards were staring at them without attacking. He knew that the two leopards had been lying there without moving, but their two pairs of ferocious and bloodthirsty eyes were staring at them closely. Leopards were extremely fast, especially those that had reached the level of mythological beast. They could almost be regarded as overlords here. Even if they encountered tiger beasts or lion beasts that were slightly stronger than them, they would not retreat half a step. But what was going on right now? Could it be that they felt that they were more terrifying than the tiger beasts and lion beasts? When he thought of this, his heart skipped a beat. He could not help but look at Feng Jiu and the rest who were not far behind him. He saw that Madame Xianyuan, Du Fan, and the others were chatting casually. He didn't know what they were talking about, but they all had smiles on their faces. There wasn't even a trace of nervousness or worry on their faces. He thought that if these two leopards were afraid of something, it was probably them. The mercenaries kept watch while Feng Jiu and the rest rested. After about 30 minutes, the two mercenaries who were scouting the way returned. They looked at the two leopards in surprise and then quickly came to Genie Feng. Leader, there are traces of a battle about 500 meters ahead. There are some corpses on the ground that could not be dealt with in time. They look like the people from the Ouyang family. There are beast claw marks on the ground and tree trunks. It doesn't look like they were ambushed by other opponents. They should have encountered a powerful beast. The mercenary paused for a moment before continuing. However, we did not find any traces of them after scouting the surrounding area. However, judging from the messy weeds that were trampled on, they seemed to have gone forward. The two of us did some research and felt that one of them should be leading the way. They should be taking the same route as us. Therefore, we speculate that they are most likely going for the Schwelling flower. Hearing this, Genie Feng nodded and said to them, "Rest for a while and stay alert. I'll go inform Madame Xianyuan and the others." After that, he walked towards Feng Jiu and the others. Genie Feng was about to speak when Feng Jiu spoke first. "I've heard what you said. Since that's the case, let's speed up." Lung Shuang, who was standing beside her, helped her stand up. She patted her dress and looked at Genie Feng, saying, "On this trip, I am determined to get the Schwelling flower. I don't want any accidents to happen and make me happy for nothing." Hearing this, Genie Feng's expression turned serious. He said, "Then we can only speed up. However, Madame Xianyuan, your body..." Before he could finish, Madame Xianyuan waved her hand and a rainbow glass feather floated in front of her. It spun in a circle and lifted her up, allowing her to sit comfortably on the flying feather. Chapter 3780. Seeing this, Genie Feng immediately shouted to the mercenaries, "Move forward quickly." With that, he took the lead to open a path for everyone. The mercenaries split into two groups, one in front and one at the back, guarding Feng Jiu and the others in the middle. However, as their pace quickened, the people at the back gradually couldn't keep up with the people in front. Even the 10 mercenaries at the front fell behind. They wiped the sweat off their foreheads, looked at each other, and started to run. At the same time, they mobilized the spiritual power in their bodies to increase their speed. Night fell. Somewhere in the forest, the people of the Ouyang family were in a tense state. At this time, they weren't as arrogant as they were when they met Feng Jiu and the others a few days ago. Instead, they were in a sorry state, and their faces were filled with nervousness and unconcealable fear. The people around them guarded vigilantly, paying attention to their surroundings. Beside the fire, the pale and weak Ouyang family head leaned against a tree trunk and looked at the fire with a solemn expression. His robes were torn, and his body was stained with blood, especially the bandaged wound on his shoulder. The white bandages were stained red and dried by the blood. Although the wound could not be seen, it could be seen from the blood-stained bandages that the injury was not light. The few young men and women sitting next to him didn't have any serious injuries, but there were many small wounds. Their bodies were tense, and their eyes were filled with panic and fear. With the slightest movement around them, they instinctively tightened their grip on their weapons and quickly looked back. The old man's expression was a little dignified. He looked at another middle-aged man who was sitting silently and finally said, "Everyone, be alert. We've already come this far, and it won't be long before we reach our destination. This mission concerns the future of the entire Ouyang family. Even if there's only one person left, we have to do our best to complete it." Everyone listened, but no one spoke. They just lowered their heads. They knew that the savage wilderness was dangerous, but they didn't expect it to be this dangerous. Nearly 100 of them had come here, and more than 10 people had died. Especially in the battle 2 nights ago, they saw with their own eyes a few people being torn apart by the ferocious beasts. They were bitten to death by the ferocious beasts. Their arms were torn off by the sharp teeth of the ferocious beasts. It was a ghastly sight. Recalling the scene of that night, the young men and women couldn't help but tremble. It was too terrifying. They watched as their clansmen were torn to pieces by the ferocious beasts. It was too terrifying. They still remembered the miserable and terrified shrill cries of their clansmen that were bitten and dragged away by the ferocious beasts, and their cries for help when they were in despair. Even now, it still caused their hairs to stand on end and their hearts to tremble with fear. Those were their clansmen, and at that moment, when they saw the despair and fear in their eyes, none of them dared to take a step forward to save them. They could only retreat while watching them die helplessly and hopelessly. "Did you hear that?" Seeing that no one responded, the old man asked again with a solemn expression. "Yes, I heard it." Only then did everyone respond. In fact, they were not confident in their hearts. They did not even know if they could walk in there and find what they were looking for. Oh, whoa. Chapter 3781. The old man saw that they all stood up instinctively, their bodies tensed up as if they were facing a great enemy. He couldn't help but shout, "Sit down. What are you nervous about? That sound is still far away from here." Hearing his words, everyone sat down awkwardly. However, no one was completely at ease. Instead, they were paying attention to whether the howling sound was approaching. As the night deepened, their mental and physical exhaustion caused them to gradually fall asleep. In the second half of the night, when they were sleeping soundly, one of the night watchers suddenly screamed and fell to the ground. Ah! That scream rang out, startling everyone awake. They quickly jumped up and shouted, "What happened?" Hiss! However, what answered them was not the voice of their clansmen. Instead, it was the hissing sound of venomous snakes sticking out their tongues. The sound was chaotic and came from far away. It seemed that there were more than 1 or 2 snakes. Not good. It's a group of snakes. Ah! It was unknown who cried out in alarm. Following that, his neck was bitten by a flying poisonous snake. That person screamed in pain. His hands tightly grasped the snake's head and body, wanting to shake it off. However, because the poisonous snake refused to let go, he was unable to shake it off. Thus, he exerted force with both hands and snapped the poisonous snake at its weakest point. Only the sound of flesh and blood being torn apart could be heard. In the dark night, the stench of snake blood spread in the air. In the next moment, the wound on the man's neck quickly turned black and purple. His lips and face quickly turned purple. He screamed and howled in pain. Black, venomous blood flowed out of his 7 orifices. Ah, hiss, be careful. Everyone be careful. This snake is highly venomous. Ah, cries of alarm rang out in the night. The people of the Ouyang clan were all in a mess. In the dark night, the venomous snakes that were as fast as lightning flew out to bite them. Once bitten, they would all die in an instant. Who? Suddenly, the sound of flames could be heard. A bonfire was burning in the surroundings. Someone shouted, "Be alert! Quickly alert! Everyone come over here!" The older men quickly stabilized the situation. After a moment of chaos, the remaining 40 to 50 people all stood in the fire circle. Under the burning flames, the smell of medicine quickly spread in the air. The venomous snakes that were originally coiled around the branches, wrapped around the corpses, and hidden in the weeds quickly retreated after smelling the smell in the air. Although they retreated, they still did not leave. They were still circling not far away and staring at them. The snake's mouth was slightly open, its venomous tongue sticking out, making a terrifying hissing sound. Everyone looked around in panic. Cold sweat appeared on their foreheads. They were afraid that the snake would suddenly jump through the flames and pounce on them. The old man steadied his mind and glanced at the Ouyang family head. Then, he looked at the middle-aged man beside him with a dignified expression and asked, "Didn't you sprinkle the snake repellent all around? Why are there still snakes attacking us?" The middle-aged man's expression was not good at this time. He looked around and said, "These snakes are not ordinary snakes. Even if ordinary snakes are extremely poisonous, there will be a time for them to slow down. They won't be like this, where the venom will rush to the head and kill people instantly." Chapter 3782. Hearing this, everyone's expression instantly turned solemn. They looked at the corpses on the ground, and one of them hesitated for a moment before saying, "Patriarch, Grand Elder, I think it's better for us to go back first. If this goes on, I'm afraid that we'll all die here. Dying here is one thing, but the problem is that we're all going to die before we even complete our mission. It's really not worth it. I also suggest that we retreat." "Me too." For a moment, everyone was saying the same thing. Only the few men and women who were following beside them did not speak. However, they all pursed their lips, and the look in their eyes could not be concealed. If they could, they also wanted to leave this place. This place was too dangerous. It was already very difficult for them to reach this place. If they continued to walk, they were afraid that they would really die here. Patriarch Ouyang looked at this scene and could not help but ponder. After a long while, he looked at the old man and was about to speak when he heard the old man's deep voice shout, "If we retreat now, all our previous efforts will be wasted." The old man looked at everyone with a gloomy face and said, "Quickly pack up and set up a defensive formation. It's just a group of snakes. Could it make all of you want to retreat?" Everyone did not speak. They clenched the long swords in their hands and listened to the hissing sound of the poisonous snakes sticking out their tongues. As time gradually passed and midnight gradually deepened, suddenly, someone's expression changed slightly. He quickly lay down on the ground and listened carefully. "What's wrong?" someone next to him asked, looking nervous. "Please don't let another group of ferocious beasts come before the group of snakes has left. It seems that someone is coming this way. Judging by the sound, there should be dozens of people," the man lying on the ground said. After listening carefully for a while, he stood up. "Patriarch, someone is really coming this way. Judging by the footsteps, I'm guessing that there are less than 50 of them." Hearing this, Patriarch Ouyang glanced at the old man and said, "How far away are they from us?" "About 500 meters. The other party's speed is very fast. They should be here soon." For a moment, no one spoke. Who would be coming? If he came over now, wouldn't he be bumping into the group of snakes? Not far away, Genie Feng, who was leading the way, stopped. He glanced at the flames in front of him and turned back to Fengjiu. "Madame Xinyuan, the flames in front are dazzling. I reckon that they are from the Ouyang family. If they have only reached here, it means that they have not reached the peak where the snow flower is located." Fengjiu sat on the flying feather and flew at a leisurely pace. The people beside her were paying attention to their surroundings. At this moment, Hui Lang tilted his head and listened. Then, he said to Fengjiu, "Madam, there should be a group of snakes in front. I can hear the hissing sound of snakes sticking out their tongues. Also, there's a faint smell of blood in the air. I think the group in front has been attacked by the snakes." "Well, it's fine. We'll go our own way," Fengjiu said, motioning for them to continue moving. Thus, under a signal, the group continued forward. When they arrived at the place in front of them, they couldn't help but be secretly surprised when they saw the scene. Chapter 3783. At this moment, The Ouyang clan members looked at the 20 people in astonishment. When they saw the 20 mercenaries and the less than 10 people, they were both astonished and shocked. Apart from mercenaries who had some wounds on their bodies and their clothes which were slightly dirty and messy, the rest of them did not have a single wound on their bodies. Moreover, their complexions were extremely radiant, and they did not look like people who had stayed in this wild and dangerous place for such a long time. Instead, they looked like people who were leisurely strolling around. As for the red-clothed woman who was pregnant with a child, she sat leisurely on a flying artifact and calmly looked at their sorry figures. At that moment, many people felt ashamed. They did not know how the mercenaries had escorted them here. Why did they not have a single wound on their bodies? Captain Jean, I didn't expect it to be you. It's great to meet you here. Ouyang family head smiled. After seeing them, he suddenly remembered something and said, Captain Jean, we can't go any further. There's a group of snakes over there. We were attacked by those poisonous snakes just now. Jean Yifeng looked at the sorry state they were in and nodded. That's right. We meet again, Ouyang clan master. His voice paused for a moment, and he led the team forward as he said, I'm familiar with this area. The snake you encountered should be the purple-gold double-headed crown. It's a venomous snake, and anyone bitten by it will lose their life in an instant. Seeing Jean Yifeng continue to lead the team forward, he instinctively wanted to speak, but he didn't know how to do so. However, what was even more strange was that when Jean Yifeng led the team forward, the snakes automatically scattered to the side, not daring to move forward. How is this possible? The people of the Ouyang family looked at this scene with astonishment on their faces. Jean Yifeng smiled embarrassedly. How could they not have seen many shocking things along the way? Ever since Madame Xianyuan said to speed up, they had not encountered any ferocious beasts. Even if they did, they would automatically avoid them, just like the snakes in front of them. After sensing their auras, they automatically avoided them. He knew that they were avoiding them not because of the mercenaries, but because of Madame Xianyuan and the rest. The elder's eyes flashed. Seeing them pass by, he immediately said to the group, Quick, keep up. As soon as he finished speaking, he led his men towards Jean Yifeng and the others. The people of the Ouyang clan followed suit. As they walked, the poisonous snakes did not dare to approach. They were puzzled but could not find a suitable opportunity to ask. Until they saw the people in front stop, the people of the Ouyang clan at the back walked forward together. But who would have thought that the moment he approached, the woman in red's indifferent voice could be heard? Let's rest for a while before continuing our journey in the morning. Also, when we continue on the road at dawn, we'll lose those people behind us. Feng Jiu said to Leng Hua. His voice was indifferent and emotionless. At the same time, it also made the Ouyang clan's blood boil. What a narrow-minded woman. The old man walked over and snorted with an ugly expression. Chapter 3784. Who were they to her anyway? What right did she have to protect them? Furthermore, their motives might be the same as theirs. Since that was the case, all the more reason for them not to travel together. She had kindly advised them, but it was fine if they did not appreciate her kindness. Instead, they had developed resentment. Indeed, it was difficult to be a good person. Leave? What right do we have to leave? You're a pregnant woman, and instead of staying at home, you're restless enough to come here. If anyone should leave, it should be you. The elder scoffed coldly as he stared at Feng Jiu with disdain and disgust. From his point of view, this woman was not content with her family. She was a woman who only had good looks. If it had not been for the mercenaries' protection, she would have died a long time ago. Yet, she still had the audacity to boast shamelessly that they should leave because their battle powers were not up to par. What a joke. Impudent. Du Fan's eyes turned cold as he berated the elder. He waved the fan in his hand, and a gust of wind attacked, sending the elder flying. He crashed heavily into a large tree several meters away. Ah! A cry of surprise came from the old man's mouth. He did not even have time to react before he was sent flying. Bang! Grand Elder! The members of the Ouyang family were shocked, and quickly rushed forward to help him up. However, as soon as they did so, they saw him spit out a mouthful of blood. Elder, on the other side, Lung Hua and the others looked on indifferently, as if they were looking at an ant. Jin Feng and his mercenaries' hearts thumped as they secretly shook their heads. This elder of the Ouyang family was a little too tactless. They had no idea how powerful Madame Xianyuan and the others were. That was why they had dared to speak to her in such a manner. Great. Now that they've angered them, they should have a taste of their own medicine, right? However, from the looks of it, the old man's injuries were not very serious. It could be considered that they had already shown mercy. Otherwise, it would have been easy for Du Fan to take his life in that short moment. Fengjiu sat by the fire to warm herself. She glanced indifferently at the elder and spoke in a nonchalant voice with a hint of coldness. The people around me don't have very good tempers, so you'd better think twice before speaking to me. It's true that I'm a pregnant woman, but the people around me are not. If they were to attack, forget about the few of you. Even if there were a few more groups, they would still be able to wipe you all out. Hearing this, the members of the Ouyang family were angry, but they did not dare to express themselves. Just now, when that person made a move, even their grand elder was no match for him. Now, who would dare to open their mouths? Seeing this, the head of the Ouyang family calmed himself down and suppressed the shock in his heart. He clasped his hands at Fengjiu and said, "Madam, I'm really sorry. If I've offended you earlier, I'd like to apologize to you. Just stay away from me. After all, what the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over," Fengjiu said indifferently. The head of the Ouyang family was a little embarrassed by her words. He could not help but look at Jin Feng, hoping that he would speak up. Jin Feng saw the look in his eyes and knew what he meant. Thus, he said to him, "Head of the Ouyang family, you'd better leave as soon as possible. The rest of you are all injured. It's not good for you to continue." Chapter 3785. The next morning, Fengjiu and the rest left. Everyone in the Ouyang family knew about it, but they all hesitated. The other party had made it clear that they were not allowed to follow them. If they followed them, it would seem, "Let's go. Follow them." The elder who had his eyes closed opened his eyes and shouted. However, this shout still caused a faint pain in his chest. Thinking about how he was injured by the young man last night, he could not help but clench his fists tightly under his sleeves. To think that he, the Grand Supreme Elder of the Ouyang family, was someone that even the master of the family had to be courteous to. However, he was injured by a young man. How humiliating. "Elder, this doesn't seem appropriate." The Ouyang family head frowned slightly. "They have already said so much. If we follow them, it's really, you must know that whether your father can successfully advance this time, and whether our Ouyang family can advance to the next level, all depends on whether we can harvest the Ling flower and use it as medicine." The elder looked at the Ouyang family head with a solemn expression and said, "The Ling flower blooms for a year. If we miss this chance, we will have to wait for next year. Do you think that if we miss this chance, we will have another chance?" The Ouyang family head was silent. He knew that if he missed this chance, he would not have another chance. However, as the master of the family, he was also a person with dignity. Now that they had said so much, if he still followed them, he would not be able to lose face. Hence, he lowered his voice and said, "Since you want to leave, let's wait first. We will leave after some time." As he said that, he did not say anything more to the elder. Instead, he walked to a nearby tree and sat down. Seeing this, the elder was so angry that his face turned red. Seeing him like this, he took a deep breath and did not say anything else. A few days later, Fengjiu and the rest, led by Jin Feng and the rest, arrived at the mountain peak with the Ling flower and stopped. Jin Feng looked up and said to Fengjiu and the rest, "Look, it's this mountain peak. The Ling flower grows on that side of the cliff. As there is a divine beast beside the Ling flower, no one has been able to harvest the Ling flower. To harvest the Ling flower, one needed to carefully dig out the roots. If the roots were broken, the medicinal effect will be lost from the roots. Hence, They could not harvest it on their swords while the beast was not paying attention. They had to dig it out carefully. Fengjiu looked at the mountain peak and said, "We can't see the Ling flower. It looks like we have to go closer or go to the top of the cliff." "Madam," Fengjiu and the rest. "Madam, it's more dangerous to go up." Madam, it's Wills." Madam, it, too, to go up." "All right, you guys can stay. Just wait here. Let's go up and have a look," Fengjiu said and glanced at Leng Hua and the others. "Master, let's go take a look first. If there are Ling flowers, we can just harvest them," Leng Hua said, worried about her health. Chapter 3786. When Du Fan and the others heard her words, they felt helpless and could only say, "Then we'll escort Master over." The mercenaries at the side were dumbfounded. It can't be. The pregnant Madame Xinyuan wanted to go up? What if that ferocious beast went berserk and hurt her and the child in her womb? Madame Xinyuan, that ferocious beast, is no ordinary ferocious beast. It's a ferocious beast that has reached the 6th or 7th level of a divine beast, Jin Yifeng said with a frown. He felt that her actions were a little inappropriate. Fengjiu smiled. "That's why I have to go up." If they went up, no matter how strong their strength was, that divine beast-level vicious beast might not necessarily stay still obediently. Only if she went up and used the ancient divine beast pressure at her body as a deterrent, the divine beast would not dare to cause trouble. She looked around and felt that this place was not bad. She said, "Commander Jin, after we go up, I'll have to trouble you to set up a formation around us. I don't want anyone or any ferocious beast to come within 100 meters." They were already going up. Why did she still want them to set up a formation here? Jin Yifeng was surprised, but did not ask. He only said, "Madame Xinyuan, don't worry. That won't be a problem." So, under the protection of Du Fan, Leng Hua, and the others, Fengjiu flew towards the direction of the cliff. After around the time for half an incense stick to burn, she arrived at the cliff. Passing through the fog, they saw a snow-white flower that was bigger than a fist blooming on the cliff. The red leaves and the snow-white flower were extremely dazzling. "Master, that's the Ling flower, right?" Leng Hua looked at the blooming snow-white flower with a smile on his face. At least this trip was not in vain. "That's right. This is indeed the Ling flower. Looking at its head, it should be quite old." She was in a good mood as she spoke. Her gaze shifted and landed on a cave beside the Ling flower. The cave was not very big, and it was pitch black, as if it was bottomless. There were no ferocious beasts coming out, but the cave was faintly filled with a savage and bloodthirsty aura. "Master, I'll go and lure that beast out," Guillermo said. Just as he was about to step forward, he was stopped by Fengjiu. "No, you don't have to go," Fengjiu said, raising his hand to stop him. She looked at the cave entrance and adjusted the pressure in her body. Not long after, the ancient aura in her body spread out and covered the surrounding area. Not only the ferocious beasts in the cave, but even the ferocious beasts in the sky and on the ground felt the ancient aura. They all trembled and lay down, not daring to move. "Come out. Let me see what kind of beast you are." Fengjiu's voice seemed to come from ancient times, containing a powerful and dignified aura. Just as her voice fell, a pitch-black four-legged dragon lowered its body and carefully crawled out. It did not dare to crawl out too far. It only lay at the entrance of the cave and looked at Fengjiu. After hesitating, it asked in a trembling voice, "Do you want to kill me?" A level 6 or 7 divine beast could already speak the human language. However, beasts rarely spoke the human language. Hearing it speak now, everyone's expression was indifferent. After all, they had seen many divine beasts speak. Chapter 3787. Fengjiu raised his eyebrows and glanced at the ferocious beast that had retracted its bloodthirsty aura, saying, "That will depend on your performance." Hearing this, the ferocious beast thought for a moment and a light bulb went off in its head. It looked at the flower at the side and asked, "You want this flower too? I can pluck it for you. Also, I've collected the snow water from the Schwelling flower. I can give it to you as well." It had been guarding the Schwelling flower. Every year, it would wait until it was about to wither before eating it. Usually, it would guard it and collect the snow water that dripped from the petals of the Schwelling flower. It originally wanted to wait until it had collected enough before consuming it all at once to increase its strength. It did not expect to meet a human that terrified it from the bottom of its heart today. The ancient coercion that this human was emitting was too terrifying. As long as it was a beast, there was no beast that was not afraid of this ancient coercion. It guessed that this human must have formed a natal contract with an ancient divine beast. Naturally, it did not dare to offend such a powerful existence. It offered up the snow water it had collected and the Schwelling flower that it had been guarding all this time just to beg for its life. This was because it did not doubt that this human had the power to crush it. Hearing the ferocious beast's words, Fengjiu's eyes flashed with surprise. "You actually know how to collect the snow water from the Schwelling flower?" Seeing that this human was interested, the ferocious beast hurriedly said, "The snow water from the Schwelling flower can help me advance, so I've been collecting it with the intention of consuming it all at once to break through. I've also been waiting until the flowering period of the Schwelling flower is about to wither before eating it." Divine beasts like them would always guard a spiritual plant because it could bring them benefits. Otherwise, it would not have been guarding this place and occupying this territory to prevent other ferocious beasts from coming over. Hearing this, Fengjiu laughed. "Since that's the case, take out the snow water. As compensation, I can give you a pill that can help you advance." When the ferocious beast heard this, it did not think much of it. For a beast of its level to advance in rank, it couldn't just rely on ordinary medicinal pills. However, it didn't dare to say anything. Instead, it quickly returned to the cave. Not long after, it came out with a jade gourd between its teeth. It placed the jade gourd at the entrance of the cave and said, "I got this jade gourd from a cultivator. I've been using it to store snow water. I've been collecting it for a long time, but this is all I have." It looked at the jade gourd with a pained expression. It was reluctant to part with it, but it knew that nothing was more important than its life. Fengjiu waved her hand, and the jade gourd flew into her hand. She looked at the jade gourd and smiled. "It's a good treasure." She unscrewed the lid and sniffed the snow water inside. Then, she poured out a drop. The drop of water that she poured out condensed into snow in her palm. After a while, it gradually melted into a drop of ice-cold snow water. Seeing this, she nodded in satisfaction. "Not bad. It's indeed the snow water from the Schwelling flower." She glanced at the ferocious beast and said, "I've always been a reciprocal person. Although the Schwelling flower doesn't belong to you, you've been guarding it all this while. You've also collected the snow water. Therefore, this pill should be yours." With that, she flicked her finger and a crimson red pill flew out from her hand and landed in front of the ferocious beast. Chapter 3788. The markings on the pill made it gulp in shock. It quickly reached out its front paw and grabbed the pill. It looked at Fengjiu and asked, Is this really for me?" "Yes," Fengjiu responded. He glanced at it and then shifted his gaze to the Schwelling flower. He leaped forward and landed on the protruding part of the flower. Lung Hua, Du Fan, and the others stepped forward and quietly surrounded her. Fengjiu stood guard there for the whole night. When the first ray of sunlight shone on the next morning, she took out a tool from her space and carefully dug out the Schwelling flower. Looking at the entire Schwelling flower, she smiled and said to the people beside her, Let's go and refine the pill." The ferocious beast, who did not dare to move, watched them leave. Only then did it stuff the pill into its mouth and press it under its tongue. Then it quickly left and went to another place. The Schwelling flower was gone, the snow water was gone, and it even met such powerful humans. Now that it was given such a heaven-defying pill, who knew when they would go back on their word and snatch the pill back? It was better for it to quickly find another place to hide and swallow the pill first before deciding what to do next. Because of the fog, the mercenaries could not see what Fengjiu and the others were doing at the cliff. They only knew that after a night, when they saw them return, everyone smiled. "Leader, they're back. They've been standing guard there for the whole night. Could they have picked the Xueling flower?" Another mercenary said and looked at Fengjiu and the others. "I didn't hear any sounds of battle." Compared to the mercenaries' surprise, Genie Feng looked at Fengjiu and the others and said to everyone, "Have the surrounding formations been set up? Have you checked it thoroughly?" "Don't worry, leader. It's all set up. There's not a single animal within 100 meters." The mercenaries immediately responded, "Everyone, go back to your positions and guard. Without my orders, no one is allowed to leave." Genie Feng ordered in a deep voice. "Yes." Everyone responded and no longer gathered together to talk. Instead, they quickly went to guard the surrounding spear array. Fengjiu and the others descended from a high place. As soon as they landed, Fengjiu instructed Lung Hua and the others, "You guys stay guard. I'm going to refine pills. Don't let anyone disturb me." "Yes." They responded and left Qin Xin to help out, while the others quickly spread out to guard the surroundings. When Genie Feng saw this, he asked, "Madame Xinyuan has picked the herbs? She still wanted to refine pills?" Right here, when he thought of this, he could not help but be secretly shocked. The medicinal pills that Xueling had refined were not ordinary. She could actually refine them? Could it be that she was an even better alchemist than the Medicine Tower's Fan Lin? Since Fengjiu was refining pills, Genie Feng could not stay by his side. Therefore, he also retreated to guard 100 meters away. It could be said that only Lung Hua and the others were qualified to stand guard at a distance of 50 meters. Qin Xin had been learning medical skills and identifying herbs for some time. At this moment, Fengjiu arranged for her to stay by his side and help out. After the area was cleaned and the items were placed, Fengjiu waved his sleeve and the alchemy cauldron appeared in front of her. Chapter 3789. Qin Xin exhaled softly and nodded. "Master, please give me your orders." Although she had already learned it before, she was still a little nervous to be her master's assistant at this time. She knew that this medicinal pill was related to whether or not the Yama Lord could wake up. There was no room for error. Fengjiu looked at the spiritual herbs on the table. She closed her eyes and once again went through the pill formula in her mind. Not long after, she opened her eyes and raised her hand. A cluster of flames flew out, and the pill furnace opened with a whoosh. The flames burned, and the aura surged as it filled the surroundings. Fengjiu paid attention to the temperature of the fire in the furnace. When the temperature of the flames in the furnace reached the level she wanted, she immediately activated the array of the pill furnace. Remove the leaves of the heavenly heart grass and leave the roots. Peel the outer skin of the 5-colored bamboo and wait for use. Soak the petals of the 7-leaf purple spirit flower in the spiritual spring water. Take the Mu Xin from the ebony wood. As Fengjiu spoke, she stared at the fire in the furnace. The array diagram on the pill furnace rotated due to the activation of the pill array. She looked serious and did not dare to be careless. Because there was only one Xueling flower, and the spiritual herbs on the table were collected for a long time before she found them. She could not afford to fail. She could only succeed in one try. As Qin Xin listened, her hands quickly processed the spiritual herbs according to her instructions. After processing each spiritual herb, she placed it on a jade plate. At this moment, she heard her master's voice and instinctively raised her head to look. Heavenly Heart Grass. Fengjiu reached out to the side. Qin Xin immediately handed the processed Heavenly Heart Grass on the table. The fire in the furnace was strong and the aura was surging. Fengjiu could also feel the heat from the furnace. She threw the spiritual herbs into the pill furnace. At the same time, her hand reached out to Qin Xin and said the next spiritual herb to be used. Every time she took a spiritual medicine, She would take a second look to see if Qin Xin had handled it properly before putting it into the furnace. She used the spiritual power in her palm, and the pure spiritual power burned in the furnace along with her life flame. Her forehead also exuded a trace of sweat. Lung Hua and the others stood guard in the surroundings. Their gazes fell on their master, who was refining pills in the middle. They were a little worried that her body wouldn't be able to take it. After all, in addition to using spiritual power and aura, one couldn't be distracted while refining pills. One's spiritual power had to be extremely concentrated. The higher the grade of the pill, the harder it was to produce pills. It was very likely that their master would have to stand like this for an entire day. For the entire day, she couldn't relax for even a moment and had to constantly pay attention to the pills in the pill furnace. This kind of high-intensity operation was usually fine, but now that she was pregnant with twins, they were really worried that she wouldn't be able to take it. With the addition of the elixirs, the burning and roasting of the flames, the fragrance of the elixirs permeated the air. The mercenaries who were standing 100 meters away watched this scene with their eyes wide open as they stared at the red figure. Even these boorish men who didn't know how to refine pills could tell that Madame Xinyuan was extremely proficient in the art of pill refinement. Although a distance of 100 meters was a bit far, they were cultivators after all. If they wanted to, they could still see clearly at such a distance. They were very curious and disgusted. However, when they saw the serious expressions on the faces of Madame Xinyuan's subordinates, they were stunned and didn't dare to say a word. They just watched quietly. Chapter 3790. However, those beasts that had already gained spiritual intelligence didn't come over at this time, but instead stared at it from 100 meters away. Fengjiu, who was standing in front of the pill furnace, turned his palm, and the spiritual herbs in his hand flew into the furnace. Some of the spiritual herbs in his hand had to be processed again before they were put into the furnace. The steps were so complicated that it was dazzling. Qin Xian handled the spiritual herbs on the table according to her master's instructions, then stood to the side and watched. This was the first time she was watching her master concoct pills from the side. She only knew that her master's concoction technique was skillful and natural. Her control of the amount of medicine added into the furnace and the furnace fire could be said to have reached the point of perfection. Even if she was watching from the side, she still couldn't understand the essence of it. She saw her master open up the wind array of the pill furnace, and with a whoosh, the fire in the furnace burned even more fiercely. After burning for a while, the intensity of the fire became gentle. Following her master's addition of one medicine after another, the medicinal smell that permeated the furnace was no longer a single medicinal smell, but many different medicinal smells that permeated the air. Some distance away, a group of 70 to 80 mercenaries were walking in the forest. When some of them smelled the medicinal smell that filled the air, they couldn't help but stop. "Big brother, there's a medicinal smell in the air. It seems to be coming from that direction," the man said and pointed in the direction of Fengjiu's group. Even if they didn't see anyone there, the medicinal smell couldn't be blocked. A tall and thin man behind them smelled the medicinal smell, and a trace of light flashed through his eyes. He walked forward and said, "There should be someone refining pills here. From the medicinal smell, this medicinal pill is not ordinary." The man in the lead had a fierce expression on his face, and his physique was that of a tiger's waist and a bear's back. At this time, when he heard their words, he narrowed his eyes and looked in the direction that the man was pointing. "Oh, this medicinal smell is not ordinary? How is it different?" He retracted his gaze and looked at the tall and thin man who spoke. "Leader, just by smelling the medicinal aroma, I can smell no less than 7 or 8 types of extremely rare spiritual herbs. If any of these spiritual herbs were to be sold outside, they would be worth thousands of gold coins. Now that so many precious spiritual herbs have been mixed together to refine a pill, even if I can't see how this pill looks like, I can guess that this pill must be extremely precious." As the lanky man spoke, he stroked his mustache and smiled. "Besides, isn't the Xueling flower in front of us?" The person who led the way said that the Schwelling flower was at the cliff in front of us. Maybe someone else got there first and picked it. Hearing this, the man in the lead narrowed his eyes and sneered. Plucked? That's our mission for this trip. Even if they took it, we'll make them spit it out. However, the man's voice paused, and his face revealed a ruthless expression. I'd like to know, who picked the Schwelling flower before us? And who's using it to refine medicine here? If the Schwelling flower has really been plucked, then we'll keep an eye on those who are refining the pill. When they're done refining the pill, we'll snatch the pill. Big brother, good idea? Leader is wise. The two people at the side immediately said. As soon as they finished speaking, they looked at each other and then looked away. Chapter 3791. Yes, sir. The man responded in a loud voice. Then, he quickly called out to a few people behind him. Raising his chi, he rushed toward the cliff. The man in the lead looked at the other two men and ordered, Number 4, Number 7, the two of you lead some people to scout ahead. Find out who those people in front of us are. How many people are there? Don't act rashly and alert the enemy. Once you're done, come back and report to me. All right, we'll go now. Two men with scars on their faces walked out. They waved their hands and led a small team of about 15 people forward quickly to scout ahead. The rest of you rest here, the man shouted and asked the others to rest. Then, he looked at the tall and skinny man and said, Come over here and tell me. Based on the smell of the medicine, can you tell what the effects of the pill are? As he said that, he walked towards the tree and sat down. The tall and skinny man paused for a moment, then followed him and sat down beside him. He said, Leader, it's hard to say. After all, each pill master uses different ingredients. Furthermore, I can only smell a few of the herbs. It's really hard to tell what kind of pill the other party is refining. As he said that, he glanced at the man. Seeing that the man's face had darkened because of his words, he was obviously not satisfied with the answer. So, he quickly said, However, those herbs are all rare items. Furthermore, the Schwelling flower's medicinal effect is to clear the veins and remove impurities and produce new blood. So, I think that no matter what kind of pill it is, it must be an extremely precious pill. However, the prerequisite is that the other party is able to successfully refine it. As he said that, he stroked the mustache above his lips and said calmly, It's just that it's not that easy to use the Schwelling flower in medicine. Even though the smell of the medicine is now pervading the forest, as long as the pill hasn't been condensed into a pill, I can't say that the pill will definitely be refined successfully. Hearing this, the man took a sip of water, pondered for a moment, and said, Looking at the entire continent, there are only a few people who truly possess superb alchemy skills. Normally speaking, most people wouldn't refine pills here unless they absolutely had to. As he spoke, a light flashed across his eyes as he continued. Currently, some dark forces outside are recruiting alchemists. This alchemist daring to perform alchemy here, it seems that in addition to being extremely confident in his alchemy technique, there is also a powerful figure following and protecting him. Otherwise, how could he have the courage to perform alchemy in such a place? Hearing his words, the tall and thin man's mouth twitched as he looked at him and asked, Commander, are you planning to recruit that person if possible? Recruit? Huh. The man narrowed his eyes and a cold smile appeared on his face. I don't intend to keep such a person by my side. Who knows when the pills I eat will be tampered with, and I won't even know if I die. He rubbed his wrist as a light flashed across his malicious eyes. However, although I'm not interested, there are many people outside who are. The people here were already planning, but they didn't know that the people they were eyeing were not a group of ordinary cultivators, but Azuras from hell who specialized in reaping the lives of certain people. Chapter 3792. Jean Yifeng's eyes narrowed. He felt a gust of wind blow past him, followed by the faint smell of blood in the air and the faint sound of something falling to the ground. His heart tightened, and he turned around abruptly. Not far away, he saw a few lifeless corpses. He was shocked and immediately rushed forward, but he did not expect another corpse to be thrown out. The next moment, he saw Du Fan walk out from behind the tree with a fan in his hand. His expression was normal, without a trace of fierceness, as if the people on the ground were not killed by him. "Leader Jean, I'll have to trouble you to deal with these corpses." Du Fan smiled, his face full of friendliness. He gently fanned his chest with the fan in his hand, and after saying that, he continued to walk back to his original position. Huilang walked out from the other side, and after taking a look, he also returned to his original position to guard. In the dark, Yi observed the surrounding scene from the tree, silently blending into the forest. "Leader," a few mercenaries walked over, wanting to say something, but after looking at the corpses on the ground, they could not say a word. What else could they say? What else was there to say? After taking a deep breath, Genie Feng walked forward to take a look. After seeing the things left behind by the dead, he frowned slightly. These are the underground mercenaries. Since they appeared here, it probably means that there are more of them. Hearing this, the mercenaries' hearts sank. The underground mercenaries are ruthless, and they often do things like robbing and killing in places like this. Now that their members have appeared here, their team is probably not far from here. If they know that their people are dead, I'm afraid. Genie Feng pondered and said, "Let's deal with the corpses first. I'll go and inform young Master Du." After saying this, he walked towards Du Fan. "Young Master Du, I have something to tell you," Genie Feng said. Even though he knew that the man in front of him was only a subordinate of Madame Xian Yuan, he did not dare to be disrespectful or presumptuous. Du Fan looked at him and asked, "What is it?" "Those mercenaries are underground mercenaries. Just now, there were only a dozen of them killed by you. I think their team should be nearby. Now that the dozen of them are dead, the people in the team will definitely come here. When the time comes, they will probably fight." Hearing this, Du Fan closed the fan in his hand and put his hands behind his back. He smiled and said, "Since they're here, it's no big deal. Do what needs to be done. Don't think too much, just stay there and guard. We're here for everything." Hearing this, Genie Feng's anxious heart finally calmed down. He replied. He turned and walked back to his original position. The mercenaries were resting and waiting for the scout to return. However, after waiting for a long time, even the people who went to the cliff to check had returned. There was still no sign of the scout. "Big brother, the Schwelling flower above has been dug away. I heard that there was a ferocious beast guarding there, but it's gone," a man said and brought people to the rest of the team. Looks like it was dug away by the people who refined the pills." He had already guessed this, so he was not surprised when he heard this answer. Chapter 3793. They're not back yet. The leader spoke in a gloomy voice. His sinister gaze fell upon the forest in front of him. No one knew what he was thinking. Seeing this, everyone looked at each other in dismay. Someone asked, "Leader, why don't we go ahead and take a look at the situation?" The leader glanced at the man who had spoken and said, "No need. Let's wait a little longer. If they're not back by sunset, there's an 80 to 90% chance that they've been ambushed." He paused and narrowed his eyes. "If they've been ambushed, you won't be able to escape death. You won't be able to bring back any information." When everyone heard this, they looked at each other and asked, "So we're just going to wait like this?" "Just wait. Even if we're going to take action, we'll have to wait until nightfall. Before that, eat and sleep well to restore our energy." "Yes," they replied, and each found a place to sit down and rest. Some took out some leftover roasted meat from last night from the space and ate it. Some closed their eyes and rested. They waited until the sun had set. The weather in the forest suddenly turned cold as night fell. The people who had been sent out to scout had yet to return. Actually, as time passed, even though they didn't say anything, they knew in their hearts that if it wasn't for the fact that something had happened, they would have returned long ago. Since they still hadn't returned, it could only mean that they wouldn't be able to return. Since the people who had been sent out to scout hadn't returned, they could only wait until nightfall to make their move. With the cover of the night and the other party's laxity, it was the best time for them to make their move. Seeing the leader stand up, the rest of the mercenaries followed suit. At this moment, the tall and thin man saw this and asked, "Leader, do you plan to make your move tonight?" "That's right." He narrowed his eyes, and a vicious look flashed across his eyes. "I'd like to see who dares to lay a hand on my people. But that pill master's pill hasn't been refined yet. If we make our move tonight, I'm afraid it'll affect the refinement of the pill." He frowned slightly. Naturally, he knew that if they made their move, the pill master wouldn't be able to refine the pill. If he were to refine the Schweling flower, wouldn't that be a waste of the pill? The leader glanced at him and said, "How do you know that the pill master will be able to refine the pill?" The tall and thin man choked and couldn't speak for a long time. "That's right." Until the last moment. "All of you, follow me." The leader raised his hand and gestured. Then he walked forward. The mercenaries behind him quickly followed without hesitation. L.E. In that empty space, Qin was already standing to the side, while Fengjiu was controlling the fire and pill formation in the cauldron. She hadn't stopped for the entire day, especially now that all the spirit herbs had been thrown into the cauldron, waiting for the pills to condense. 2. Chapter 3794. Mistress, do you want Qin Xin to help you massage your shoulders? Qin Xin saw that her mistress was only guarding the furnace and paying attention to the temperature of the fire. She knew that she didn't need to do anything else but wait for the herbs to fuse and condense into the elixir. Thus, she wanted to help her mistress massage her shoulders so that she could relax and not be so tired. Fengjiu had been busy for the whole day, and her shoulders were a little stiff. Thus, she said, "Okay, help me loosen my shoulders." "Yes," Qin Xin replied with a smile. She went behind Fengjiu and helped her massage her shoulders to loosen her muscles and bones. Fengjiu ate the spirit fruit while looking at the furnace in the furnace. She smelled the fragrance of the herbs in the air. With a flip of her palm, a stream of air flew into the furnace. The burning flames became a little smaller, like a warm fire that was slowly refining the herbs in the furnace. Du Fan and the others looked around. Although there was an array around them, they knew that someone was trying to break through the array based on the sounds that came from the array. "You guys stay here. I'll go out with Hui Lang and the others to take a look," Du Fan said to Lung Hua and Lung Shuang and the others. Then he led the others out. Unexpectedly, before they could get out of the array, they heard a rumbling sound. The array was broken. Du Fan and the others stopped and looked at the broken array in surprise. They were a little surprised. This array was set up by Genie Feng and his mercenaries. They didn't get involved. However, this array had strong defensive power. Now that it was broken so easily, it seemed that these underground mercenaries were really skilled. "Are you the ones who killed our brothers?" The leader of the group walked out, followed by a group of mercenaries. They stared ahead, and their gazes fell on Du Fan and the others. They looked like they were in their 20s or 30s and looked like young masters. They didn't take them seriously. Their gazes swept past them and landed on Genie Feng behind them. Their eyes flashed slightly. Genie Feng, the leader of the first mercenary group? The leader stared at Genie Feng with an unknown, deep meaning in his eyes. "Exactly," Genie Feng replied in a low voice. He walked over to Du Fan and the others and looked at them. "What do you want?" "Ha ha." Hearing Genie Feng's words, the man in the lead raised his head and laughed loudly. His laughter was arrogant and conceited. Suddenly, he stopped and stared at Genie Feng with a vicious and bloodthirsty expression. "What do you want to do? Shouldn't we be the ones asking you what you want?" Originally, he thought that it would be a very large and strong team, but he didn't expect that there would only be so few people here. Even if they were protected by the number 1 mercenary group, they would not be able to defeat so many people. Moreover, he had long wanted to experience the skills of the number 1 mercenary group leader, Genie Feng. He took a step forward, and a vicious voice came out of his mouth. "You killed more than 10 of my brothers, huh? I won't let it go so easily." Genie Feng frowned slightly, but he didn't say anything. He just pulled out the sword at his waist and said, "Since you want to fight, I'll keep you company. I've long wanted to experience the skills of the #1 mercenary group leader. It just so happens that I have a chance to fight with you today." I couldn't ask for more. As the leader spoke, he waved his hand and a long sword appeared in his hand. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.